Hey truckers, today we're seeing part 5 of Supremacy games. Let's dive into the video. After 3 days, the fatty blue worm brought Felix's delivery and left swiftly. Felix immediately took the bloodline first and called Asna to prepare for the integration. He was impatient to start. After setting all of the potions necessary near him, he took the large needle and injected half the bottle in his heart, followed by the remaining half. Asna already became proficient in reading memories and filtration, thus it took merely a couple of seconds before she found that the epic tier 5 he bought had a 12% of the J. Rumungandr bloodline. Ha ha ha. Felix laughed in elation after finally hearing some good news. He was truly about to lose his shit after failing 3 times to find a single drop of the ancestral bloodline within the previous bottles during the last 3 months. Due to this, he got surpassed by the hardworking Noah and Olivia, who already reached lesser purity a month before, while others were quite close to it. Felix struggling to reach the lesser purity raised some suspicious bells in the elders' minds. After all, Felix's affinity was not bad, but actually the third best one in the family. So for him to not reach lesser purity even after reaching the end of the training camp was truly strange in their opinion. But they did not question him or scold him. They simply left him be and do as he pleased. The only thing they knew was that, if he didn't reach lesser purity next week by the end of the camp, he would get ganged up by them and beaten up for wasting the legendary bloodline potential. Fortunately, that wouldn't be a problem anymore after obtaining 12% all at once. Felix requested Asna to only use exactly 6% to merge with, leaving 6% for later. He had no reason to torture himself anymore by adding as much as possible to lower the integration periods. Because he currently had a 94% affinity rating, which meant he could integrate every few days without waiting too much. Asna did as he asked and watched with a bored expression Felix grit his teeth with bloodshot eyes, enduring all of the pain without screaming anymore like a little girl. This greatly saddens her, as she felt like another fun part of her already dreadful life was removed. 15 minutes later. Felix did not pass out this time from the pain, but still, he lay on the ground with shallow breaths. After a while, he moved his hands with difficulty and grabbed the rejuvenation potion. After drinking 2 of those, he stood up and did his stretching routine to relieve his joints, then went to take a shower. 10 minutes later, he sat on the floor in a meditation position composedly. Let's begin. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes, diving deep within his memories to read the newly obtained information that he just unlocked. It was time to see if he would unlock 2 abilities like before, or merely 1 ability like everyone else. After a few seconds, Felix opened his eyes and grinned widely, showing his crystal white teeth. He blinked for a few moments without saying anything. Just bathing in the euphoria of knowing that all of his efforts, struggles, and millions of SC thrown down the drain were damn worth it after seeing the 2 active abilities that he unlocked. Poisonous Aura and Poison Bomb. He said the names with clear agitation in his voice, as he knew that there were a few abilities that had only poison on it, without the classification of the type of poison used. For example, in normal situations, the Poisonous Aura should be a weakness, paralyze, or dizziness inducement aura, and this was the same in the case of Poison Bomb. Read the latest stories novilbin.com. But when the abilities only had poison without classification, it signified the horrifying truth that Felix could use all types of poison in his aura and bombs. This was the same as having hundreds of abilities and only 2 active abilities, it merely depended on Felix's way of using them. That's why he was glad he continued treading on this path that kept rewarding his effort each time he reached a milestone. Truly, the primogenitor bloodline, the ruler and controller of poison element, did not disappoint at all. Felix suddenly logged in the UVR, impatient to test them in the ability measurement center. After a while, he reached the center and paid for the VIP room like before. After entering, he was greeted by the same monotone AI. "Dear sir, what types of abilities you want to test?" physical, elemental, or mental? Elemental, please. Felix answered. Which element do you desire to test? Poison element. As you wish, sir. Immediately after, the entire room got wider like before, but this time it got split into 4 areas. The first one for testing offensive poison abilities. The second one was for testing defensive poison abilities. The third one was for testing environment adaptation abilities. Lastly, an area for testing the details of the poison used, such as the toxicity level, the period it took for the poison to take effect, or such information. Felix went for the offensive area, as both of his abilities were attacking types. The moment he stepped inside, the AI asked him, "How many training dummies do you need?" 10 for now, and put them a meter away from each other, until the last dummy is 10 meters away from me. As you wish, sir. Shortly after, 10 silver dummies were created in front of Felix in a straight line. Do you want them to have AI or remain stationary? She asked. Stationary for now. After Felix answered the last question, he shook his muscles to relax and exhaled a long breath. Then called softly, "Poisonous aura." The moment he activated the ability, his dreadful slits thinned until only a single line could be seen. Then without a warning, a dark purplish mist emerged furiously from all of his body pores until it reached the 8th dummy and stopped spreading further. However, it remained active in an 8-meter diameter around Felix. Just as Felix wanted to analyze his ability, his vision got muddled, like he was about to faint. Felix knew what happened and deactivated his ability swiftly, not daring to continue having it on. What the F***CK? How could it consume all of my energy in mere seconds? He breathed ruggedly with frowned eyebrows. However, his doubts were soon cleared after hearing the AI scanning details. Dummy number 1, 2, 3, 8 were poisoned by 87 types of poisons. Do you want me to name them, sir? Speechless, Felix stopped breathing at once after hearing the massive number of inducements he threw all at once. He thought that his poisonous aura was at most going to have 15 inducements or so, as he read before that there were legendary bloodlines that allowed the user to switch between either 3 inducements or even 5 inducements max. So, he believed that his bloodline should at least have 15 inducements since his bloodline belonged to the primogenitor. Yet, it turned out that his thinking was still limited to what he read, as he actually had a whopping 87 types of poison. No wonder his energy did not last for a mere 3 seconds. After all, his tank capacity was still quite pathetic to use this ability to its full potential. Am I actually allowed to use any inducement I want? His eyes couldn't help but brighten up at such a thought. He knew before that it might actually be possible, but Felix was quite a pessimistic person, thus unless he saw it with his own eyes, he would not dare to believe it. But now, what else could he say? 87 inducement was enough to clear his doubts. However, there was one minor doubt still stuck on his mind, and that was the current shown number of inducements. Was it limited due to his body strength and energy tank, or that was just the total number in his possession? He knew that in the universe there were a lot more poisons than the mentioned number. Whatever, 87 inducements or billion. It wouldn't matter much if I wasn't able to use them properly. Felix smiled wryly and requested the AI to bring his energy back to full capacity for the second round. He understood pretty clearly that he shouldn't be thinking about lusting for more inducements but to actually master using the ones that he currently had. Otherwise, Asna would beat him up for not giving justice to the primogenitor bloodline. The AI did as told, and soon Felix was back in shape again. All right, let's try this again. But this time I will only use Paralyze Inducement Aura. Full of anticipation, Felix eyed at the dummies in front of him and called out loud, "Paralyze Aura activate! Paralyze Aura activate!" Instantly, the same mist was released from Felix's body. But this time it was not dark purple, but light yellow, looking almost transparent, surrendering Felix in an 8-meter diameter. Felix dragged his fingers slowly in the mist with intoxication on his face. He felt that everything within the mist was under his surveillance and vision. This was his aura, his domain, that anyone who stepped inside would be under his mercy. Satisfied, he smiled and focused his eyes on a screen that was on the silver dummy's chest, showing the details of his paralyze effect. Interesting, the entire body gets immobilized after taking one whiff of the mist. He raised an eyebrow in surprise and added, the effects last only 5 seconds after leaving the aura? Understandable. It was quite obvious that his poison wouldn't actually have a permanent effect after taking only one whiff. However, those inside his aura would be constantly under effect, so if someone even dared to step inside it, Felix would make sure to keep him inside for eternity. Soon after, he moved on and continued reading the rest of the details with interest. The poison does not differentiate between friend and foe? Typical. Felix merely gave a side note on this detail and left it be. He knew that all abilities were also the same. After all, this wasn't a video game where one could enter a hailstorm created by his ally, just to exit from it unharmed. Only morons would dare to pull that shit, or people with blind trust to their allies' elemental control. I guess that's it. After seeing that no further details were written, he began walking forward, and as he expected, the mist followed around him wherever he went like a spherical shield. Pleased, he nodded his head lightly, as he preferred it this way and not to remain stationary, like a summoning ability. Otherwise, the prey that entered his aura could easily escape it. Let's do a limit test. He stopped walking and sat on the ground, doing nothing at all. He wanted to see how long could his aura remain active until his energy runs out. After a while, he started to feel dizzy and deactivated his ability. He then asked the AI for the duration. It's been 12 minutes and 45 seconds since the moment you activated your ability, sir. The AI responded. Not bad, actually. Felix was quite pleased with 12 minutes, as this duration might sound short, but actually, it was even after continuous activation. While in real battles, he could activate it for a few seconds for the effect to take place, then deactivate it. This way his energy consumption would be minimized to the limit. Not to mention, this duration was actually double what he should have got, since before, he had only a 59% affinity rating. That meant his abilities' powers, effects, duration and such, should be only half what he just got. In other words, 6 minutes to 7 minutes max. However, now that he got a whopping 94% affinity rating and on the verge of reaching 100%, Felix was going to enjoy double the strengths of his abilities. One of them was the increased radius of his aura. If it wasn't for his high affinity rating, his aura was supposed to stop at 4 meters only. Yet now, he actually had 8 meters all at once. If it wasn't for such clear benefits and bonuses, Felix wouldn't have chased everywhere just to secure a 100% affinity rating, and the elders of his family wouldn't have been so excited after seeing that Noah had 70%. Affinity rating wasn't only useful to reduce the cooldown of integration, but also empower the abilities to new heights. Alright, let's try switching inducement after activation. He quickly began the next experiment after the AI got him to peak form again. He snapped his finger and the light yellow mist surrendered him again. He then called out loud, "Switch to sleepiness aura." The mist that was around him rapidly got sucked inside his body, then released again. However, this time, it was a pure white mist, resembling a cloud of fog, blocking everyone's vision, whether those outside or inside the domain. Except for Felix, of course, who could see everything clearly. I see, the mist must return to my body for each switch, and not change while already in the air. Felix guessed as much, since it wouldn't make sense for the poison to change to another without re-entering his body. If that happened, it meant that the poison was added to the previous one and not replaced. Soon after, he read the details of the effect on the dummy and found out that everything was the same except for the debuff intended. As before it was paralyzed for 5 seconds, now it slept for 5 seconds. They might be dummies, but they had the bodies of humans. Thus, every effect on them was the same as on the human body. After seeing those results, he moved to energy endurance and found that the duration was the same as well. Alright, it seems that all poisons are going to have the same details. He scratched his chin. Still, more experiments are needed to make sure. He deactivated the ability while thinking of the next experiment. There is still the combined inducements detail that needs to be worked upon as well. But I will leave those for later. For now, let's move on to the next ability. Eager, Felix walked away from the dummies, trying to put a substantial distance between each other. After reaching 15 meters, he stopped and activated Poison Bomb. Immediately, 2 balls that had the size of a baby's head were created swiftly on both of his hands and kept revolving above them, not touching his palms. One was dark green, while the other was dark purple. Before Felix managed to throw them out, he dropped on the ground exhausted. Fuck, the consumption for them is even worse than poisonous aura. Irritated, he asked for the AI to return his energy. After a couple of seconds, Felix stood up while sighing over having 2 overpowered abilities, but still having to limit their usage due to his weak body that couldn't handle their full power. There was a lot of work to be done in order to understand how to merge inducements and which inducements should be merged to get the best possible outcome without sacrificing too many energy points. However, for now, Felix should only focus on mastering using one inducement properly. As for merging, he should leave that for later. 20 minutes later. Felix finished testing his bomb's advantages and weaknesses. He found out that the details of his inducement debuffs were still the same. The only difference was that he was able to throw the bombs as projectiles and control their explosion timing. Plus, his energy only allowed him to throw 50 bombs or so before he got sucked dry. Lastly, the most interesting difference was that he could add different inducements for each bomb on a hand. In other words, he could throw 2 types of poisons at once. Felix was quite pleased by having 2 AoE abilities. One could be used for pure offense, while the other had a variety of usages. He just needed to find them out. This was exactly what he tried to do for the next 2 hours of training in the room. See check out LTSTVL on novl/bin.cm. He fought with 10 AI dummies that were set on hard difficulty. Felix did not fare well against their various abilities and elements by merely using his 2 newly acquired abilities that he had no experience using before. Hence, he got bashed for 2 hours straight until he got kicked out of the room. Nonetheless, he left overjoyed, since he learned quite a few good inducements combinations. If only the VIP room was not so damn expensive to use, he would have spent days training in it. Unfortunately, that's not a solid plan for the future, even if he currently owned 1 billion SC or more. The measurement center was for testing, not training. That one had its own center that Felix planned to visit later on. For now, he got other plans to make. 4 hours later. Felix logged out of the VR after successfully purchasing the VR pod that was a must for any Supremacy game player, in a house within the capital city Androxa. Now that he had the necessary strength to join the SG, there was no need to wait until he reached the greater purity anymore. His abilities were enough to destroy any bronze or silver player. However, for now, he needed to get dressed and head towards the 35th floor, as the last combat battle in the training camp was about to happen. Felix never participated in those battles that were recurring weekly in the 3rd stage of the camp, by relying on the excuse that he did not reach lesser purity yet. But now that he had, he must fight this one and win beautifully to get the elders off his back. Otherwise, he would truly get beat up, and he was afraid about them breaking a bone after hitting his enhanced body. It's time to bully my cute cousins, he smirked while leaving his room. The 35th meeting floor. Felix was chatting with Olivia while waiting for the elders to arrive and start the battles. A couple of minutes later, they arrived one by one, dressing formally, walking towards the stage without batting an eye to the juniors. Felix and the others stopped chatting at once and got in their position. They then bowed their head respectfully to the elders. Abraham took the microphone from the podium and greeted as well with a smile. Good evening, children. Today is the day of the weekly battle, but this one is going to be the last, and also the true decider of who will be the captain of our Maxwell team. He paused for a few seconds to see if anyone was interested in this position. Sadly, he found that only 2 or 3 had a spark in their eyes. As for the important juniors like Noah, Olivia, Felix, and even Kenny, none of them cared for such a position, as it didn't have any merits but only trouble and annoyance. In their eyes, being the team captain was the same as being the class monitor. Dejected and annoyed by their lackluster reaction, Abraham sighed and continued his speech. Just like before, the battle will be 1v1 in the UVR, so fight to your heart content without worry. He then turned his sight to Felix, who was dozing off, and asked suddenly with narrowed eyes. Felix, are you going to join them this time? Felix broke off his daze and responded casually, Don't worry, Elder, I will take part as well. Oh, did you reach lesser purity? Robert asked thunderously near the elders, almost bleeding their ears. Felix nodded his head in confirmation. Finally, you little shit, it's about time. Noah is almost about to reach 45% and unlock the second passive. He smiled with his eyes narrowed dangerously, You better catch up, son. Felix smiled wryly and glanced at Noah, who was standing in the middle of the group composedly like a street light pole. Felix's path and Noah's path were completely different, as Noah's could easily surpass him in integration percentages, but so what? Felix might be slow due to the difficulty of finding the J-Rumungandr bloodline, but still, he would always be ahead of him in terms of strength. Regardless, reaching 45% without even relying on double percentage potion? Noah was honestly quite hardworking. As to reach that percentage, he was probably integrating with 8% or even 10% each time. If he had those potions, he probably would have already reached the origin purity by now. Unfortunately, each potion cost at least 200 KSC, and the family definitely couldn't afford to get some for him. Even Felix, when he gifted Olivia potions, he only gave her rejuvenation potions and beauty potions. He didn't gift her double percentage potion, as its effect was quite obvious and the elders were sure to grill Olivia where she got them. In other words, he would get invited for another cup of tea. This was one of the reasons he wanted to ditch the family and return to his island, leaving their supervision. At that point, he could do what he pleased without being on their radar constantly. The battles are going to be the same as always, 1v1. Whoever won all of his battles will be the captain. If the winner does not want to be the captain, then you can simply come and tell us. Abraham smiled warmly and added, But our answer will always be no. So don't bother yourself. Felix grumbled under his breath, since that was exactly what was he planning on doing. Win beautifully, then ditch the responsibility. The elders added this clause because of Noah, who they thought would clutch the win, since Olivia wasn't participating in the battles due to her supportive abilities, while Kenny never won a battle against Noah before. Meanwhile, Felix had just unlocked his active ability without practicing it like Noah did for the past 2 months. As for the others, Sarah and Jackson had just reached the lesser purity like Felix, while the rest were merely here to add numbers since none of them had reached the lesser purity yet. Because they didn't integrate too many percentages each phase, not confident in handling the increased pain. So in a sense, the elders already decided that Noah was the strongest in the team and rightfully should be the captain. But they knew he would reject the offer, due to his personality. Hence the clear condition that the offer was non-rejectable. Unfortunately for the elders, their plan went upside down when the battles began and Felix started to thrash his cousins one by throwing nearly a single paralyzed bomb, then rushed to knock them out with a light jaw punch. The moment he stepped inside the arena, no one touched his clothes or managed to activate their abilities properly. The elders just watched speechlessly at this merciless beatdown, or in this case, pure bullying. He used the same strategy for all of them except for Kenny, as he went an extra mile to hurt him badly. Yet, no one saw anything weird about it since Kenny really had a punchable face. After a while, only Felix and Noah were left in the finals. Felix gave him a bit of face and let him activate his ability. Noah did not waste time and instantly activated Ice Mace, an ability that allowed him to create a large mace made of crystallized ice. The majority of cryogenic Yeti bloodline abilities were either ice-made melee form ones or physical morphing abilities. That's why Noah was currently not holding the mace in his hand but used his energy to keep it hovering slightly above it since his body couldn't handle its weight. Felix sighed in pity after seeing this, as this was the true meaning of using a bloodline that didn't fit your style at all. The elders merely bought the cheapest rare-ranked bloodlines they could find without caring about those nitty-gritty details that could lower the strength of a bloodliner by at least 30%. Noah dashed forward while dragging the heavy mace behind him like a berserker. If only his facial expression wasn't stoic as always, he would truly resemble one. Felix did not flinch at this sight, he merely snapped his finger and an acid green-colored bomb was created behind his back and stayed hovering there without Noah's knowledge. Visit NoV3LB/N.cm for new OVL. Noah did not think that Felix was looking down on him after not seeing any bombs in his hand, rather he raised his vigilance even further and held his breath, trying to avoid absorbing Felix's poison. He didn't know if it took effect by skin touch or direct absorption, but he had nothing to lose by holding his breath. In his mind, it's an instant win if reached Felix without eating his paralyzed bomb. Sadly, things did not go as planned for him, as the moment he tried to swing his heavy mace, planning to bash Felix's face. Poof! A sudden explosion engulfed him and Felix, covering both of them in an acid green mist. The only difference was that Felix was completely fine, while Noah's skin began to melt gradually, forcing him to let out a pained groan and drop the mace to the ground. Before he was tortured even further, Felix kicked him out of the bomb radius and followed swiftly by a punch to the chin, knocking him out cold. Good fight. Felix clapped his hands twice with a smile and withdrew himself from the man-made arena in Abraham's UVR room. He knew that Noah was smart enough to realize that his paralyzed bomb relied on either absorption or skin contact. Noah could do nothing about skin contact, but for absorption, he could totally hold his breaths and avoid getting poisoned. Thus, Felix didn't rely on paralyze inducement, but acid inducement, a poisonous substance that was effective by skin contact. Unfortunately, its effects were quite painful, as a small exposure to its dose and the skin would be melted, while a large exposure could even turn a person into a liquid goo. That's why Felix kicked Noah away, as he didn't want to torture him without any reason. He might not die inside Abraham's UVR room, but it sure would hurt like hell. Immediately after Felix reached the elders and his cousins, they kept staring at him wide-eyed, having no idea what the F***ck had just happened. Noah that brutalized those juniors for weeks lost without landing a single hit? What kind of sick joke was this? But this was the reality. Felix was truly just here to bully them, nothing more, nothing less. Even Noah was still a combat child in Felix's eyes. Those past months of training and battling each other meant absolutely nothing in front of Felix's decades of experience in his previous life. So, they never had a chance against him. Hell, Felix could win by relying only on his super strength passive. However, he planned to hide it and show only his poison immunity, or in their eyes his peak poison resistance. He couldn't tell them that he awakened 2 passives at 15%, thus one passive had to remain hidden. His super strength was easier to hide, as he could control his strength input. On the other hand, his poison immunity was a must-have, since if he didn't have it, his skin would have been melted as well by the bomb explosion. Just because everyone used elements, it did not mean that getting harmed by their abilities wasn't an option. Heck, the only reason defensive passives, like elemental resistances, were always being unlocked first, was to somewhat offset getting hurt by one's own abilities. Felix, can you please explain the active ability that you unlocked? Charlotte asked curiously after seeing Felix bash every junior with light yellow bombs, then switch to acid green one suddenly. Well, I unlocked poison bombs. This ability allows me to create bombs with 5 types of different poisons. He coughed to hide his bullshit and continued, what I used now to fight was only paralyze bombs and acid bombs. I can switch to other inducements as well. Like this. He snapped his finger, and a light yellow bomb got created on top of his hand. He then said switch, and the color of the bomb changed to acid green. He said switch again, and the color turned pink. Suddenly he threw it towards Kenny, exploding near his face. Speechless, everyone watched Kenny remove his clothes with flushed cheeks and hazy eyes like he just ate 3 aphrodisiac pills. However, after 5 seconds his eyes regained clarity, and wore his clothes back without a hint of anger or humiliation. He merely smiled warmly and said, I am happy to be your test subject. Felix chuckled lightly and didn't bother replying to this traitorous snake. A legendary rank bloodline truly did not disappoint. The elders' minds had only this thought after seeing Felix's demonstration on Kenny. Each color represents a different effect, as you have noticed. So I suggest for you guys to memorize all of my 5 inducements. To be able to predict the debuffs instantly during our team battles. Felix did not wait for the elders to keep questioning him about his ability details. He decided to take control of the conversation and guide them through his lies. Robert supported his grandson sternly. He is right, all of you needs memorize them. And most importantly, not spread his ability details to anyone, not even your parents. The fewer people know about our hidden cards, the more slots we will be able to clutch. So behave yourselves. Everyone nodded their heads in agreement. No one was dumb enough here to expose Felix to their competitors, since in the eyes of the juniors, the stronger Felix was the better chances they would have to get chosen for the US national team. Good, now let's conclude this battle by a round of applause in celebration for the coronation of your captain, Felix. Abraham said warmly while clapping his hands. The juniors followed after him and clapped their hands boomingly. Felix indifferently took it in, while waiting patiently for them to finish so he could say his piece. After a while, they gradually stopped and Felix immediately said, not letting the elders excuse them, Elders, I will write a list for my inducement effects plus their color so you can hand it later to my cousins to memorize. He paused for a second and said what he really wanted, I am planning to head back to the island. I still have tons of unfinished work to be managed there. So I can't remain here anymore. Just as the elders wanted to reject his proposition, they heard Felix promise them. Don't worry, I will return when the national team battle begins 3 months later. Abraham sighed and asked, why are you leaving in such a rush? If it is just about the island, we can send our people to supervise everything without bothering yourself. Felix shook his head lightly. No, I need to be there personally since I plan to turn the island into my home. While we are still on the subject, can you tell me when are we going to sign the 51% shares transfer contract? He scratched his nose, as he asked bashfully. The elders rolled their eyes at his shameless request right after he planned to ditch the training camp. But they still honored their word and informed him that the contract was already made. It had been only waiting for Felix to sign. This clearly showed the trust they had in Felix from the beginning to perform well in the camp. Felix bowed his head lightly in appreciation for indirectly accepting his leave of absence. He knew that the camp period was supposed to end 7 days from now. But after showcasing his ability that had multiple strategies revolved around it, it meant that the camp should have its duration increased by a month or two until a good synergy between him and his cousins was built. However, Felix had no time for that bullshit. He simply wanted to rush to the island and enter the VR pod to start his training and climbing the ranks of the Supremacy Games. Most up-to-date NVELs are published on n0velgn.co/m. It was time to enter the major league and start putting his mark in the universe. 2 days later, Felix said his goodbyes to everyone and stepped inside the jet while carrying his luggage, planning to directly fly towards the Sky Pearl Island. His training camp journey had officially ended after achieving everything he arrived here for and more. He obtained the AP bracelet, he cured his grandfather's fragile heart, plus gave him extra centuries to live, and he saved Olivia's life from death in the awakening process. In addition, he earned some favors from the parents of the children he indirectly saved. Finally, he signed the contract that gave him full control over the island management. So he had no reason to remain anymore. Now, Felix was returning to the island after 6 months of absence, hoping that the remodeling was going smoothly. After 3 hours of flight, the outline of the island appeared through the jet window. Felix logged out from the UVR after being informed by the Queen AI that he was about to arrive. After a while, he put his seat belt on, in preparation for landing. A few seconds later the jet glided down slowly until it touched the airport runway asphalt. It kept slowing down until it stopped smoothly without any hiccups. "Young master, you can step outside now," the pilot announced. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Morris." Felix thanked the pilot politely while removing his seat belt. He then stood up and took the luggage that was above him and stepped out of the jet. If it was up to Felix he would have put all of his stuff inside the spatial card, but that would appear strange to everyone else, and questions would start to rain on him. So he could only take some clothes with him to avoid that situation entirely. After he exited the jet, his eyes made contact with hundreds of workers doing their job properly. Some were driving the construction vehicles, and some were giving clear orders while supervising everything with clarity. Felix smiled in praise at this scene as he walked down the staircase. He was wearing a formal black suit with a black tie, his green hair was messy and short as he cut it again yesterday, not pleased by its long length. His violet serpent-like eyes were hidden behind black sunglasses. "Welcome back, young Master Felix. I hope you had a pleasant flight." Layla and Jack bowed their head and greeted Felix politely. They didn't react too much to his appearance because they had already seen it before during a Skype conversation. So, they were already quite familiar with his new looks. "Thank you for coming here to welcome me," Felix replied with a chuckle while giving them each a quick hug. After doing so, he handed his luggage to Jack and trod forward with his hands folded behind his back. "Update me on each building progress. Keep it short," he requested from Layla. Layla followed after him while reading from a small note she prepared just for this question. First, the seaport and the hospital remodeling had finished completely last month. All of the faulty equipment was replaced with brand new ones. She paused for a second to hear Felix's response. "Good, carry on please." Layla flipped the page after noticing that Felix did not ask about the details she wrote on them. She then continued on her report. "As for the residential area and the airport, our analytics predicted that we will finish their construction remodeling in 4 months if we kept going at this pace." Felix did not reply, as he was staring in fascination at the newly remodeled interior of the airport. Everything that he saw on Eddie's design was in its place, from the baggage carousel that was inside an artificial waterfall, which was fixed using a unique method to not spill a single drop on the luggage, to flower gardens that were designed as pearl shapes in a wide area. If someone saw those flower gardens from the floors above, they could easily notice that they were placed in specific positions to make a large sky word. This combination signified the name of the island Sky Pearl. Felix wanted to use this design even if he kicked Eddie away, simply because of those beautiful aesthetics. Those were but merely two of the many ones. He stopped looking around and asked Layla suddenly. What happened to Eddie? Did he leave after refusing the punishment? Layla shook her head and giggled slightly after remembering what Eddie said to her. He told me that even if you beat him up he will not leave. Because he thinks that this is the best design he made so far, and he wants to see through its end. Amused, Felix chuckled lightly and said, no wonder he lusted for the best resources. He plans to turn his airport into one of the best. Whatever, let him do as he pleases as long as he knows his limit. Now tell me about the hotel. Did Abigail start remodeling it yet? Yes, but she just started last month after the hospital finished. So nothing much changed yet. All right, I will go take a look at other buildings later. For now, I will head to my suite. In 2 hours both of you pay me a visit. I need to show you something. Understood? He instructed them while entering his ride home. Yes, young master, they answered while bowing their heads. Just as Felix wanted to close the door, he heard them thank him again for the gifts he sent before. Felix merely waved his hand with a mild smile on his face. Don't mention it. Felix reached the hotel in only 10 minutes by using the newly constructed highway that connected the airport and the hotel. The chief constructors decided to first build solid paths in the island to facilitate the movement of their vehicles, since it was impossible to rush the construction within 2 years if the paths connecting the island were uneven. Felix gave the green light for the chiefs to do as they please after he left. Honestly, it was the best decision he made, simply because he knew absolutely nothing about construction. It was always better to let the professional do their jobs than to arrogantly give retarded orders just because he was the boss. This was the result of Felix leaving his hand out of everything. 2 buildings were done, 2 others were on the way, and the last one had just begun construction. Felix immediately went to his suite without bothering anyone from doing their job. Good thing, he wore sunglasses hiding his eyes, as every lady he met on the way gave him a second glance, appreciating his handsome appearance. But that was it, none of them left their workstation to hit on him since Felix was emitting an obvious "don't approach me" vibe. After entering his bedroom he removed his clothes and straightway took a quick shower. A few minutes later, he wore a new pair of clothes and left the suite, planning to scout the building situations to get it over with as soon as possible. After all, he was about to enter the UVR and remain inside for a quite long time. Felix drove by himself towards the seaport to check on how the remodel turned out. 12 minutes later, he parked near the dock and exited the Jeep. Immediately after seeing the new seaport, he could only nod his head in praise. Even though nothing major changed from the design itself, nonetheless, all of the equipment now looked brand new and clean with red and yellow luster on them after the paint job Barry did. The entire seaport now only needed employees and workers to handle its operations. All right, now the residential area and the hospital. Felix didn't spend even 2 minutes in the seaport before re-entering the Jeep and driving rapidly in the direction of those buildings. After 5 minutes he arrived at the center of the island that turned into a large residential area able to host tens of thousands of employees and their families. Visit NOV3LB/N.CM for new OVL. Felix did not step outside of the Jeep but merely spectated everything from the window of his car while driving by. Even though the design was quite standard, it still had all of the foundations needed for a residential area, such as school, gyms, grocery shops, parks, pools, and more. The only thing missing was college, but he couldn't do much about it. At the end of the day, this was just an island, and not a single professor would stay away from the academic scene to teach in the middle of nowhere. However, Felix already had within the employment contract that students would have all of their travel expenses from the island to the college free of charge. Felix specifically wanted for all of his employees to feel complete on this island without lacking anything, making his island a paradise for families. Shortly after, he parked near the hospital and entered a clean-looking glass building. He surveilled each room and found that everything was proper, just like a large hospital. The only complaint he had was about the bad shapes of the medical equipment and how outdated they were. Since I already obtained the transfer contract, I can start replacing those equipments with brand new ones. I can't have my VIPs insult my island due to them. Felix made a mental note while walking further down the hospital. Soon he reached the elevator and clicked on the top floor where the VIP rooms were supposed to be. 10 minutes later, he left the hospital completely satisfied. Everything he saw was perfect, except for the equipment. But that was not Abigail's fault. She did her job wonderfully. Now it was his turn to upgrade the hospital. Without further ado, he called his Aunt Mary and informed her about the current situation. "Don't worry, dear Felix, I will call Layla to give me all the details of the equipment needed after, so I will send you a fine," she said calmly. "All right, thank you, Auntie. I will leave the payment for Layla to handle as well. Goodbye, dear, and thank you for your gift again. You made me happy after seeing all of my friends' envious looks." She giggled like a girl in her teenage days. She truly seemed overjoyed by the everlasting youth potion. "As long as you are happy, Auntie, talk to you later." Felix hanged up, smiling. 1 hour later, the blue fatty worm brought Felix his VR pod and left while throwing some insults at Felix for no reason. Felix touched the large silver metallic pod gently and felt the smoothness of its material. He then clicked a blue button at the side, and the glass door slid to the side, revealing the comfortable interior. He stepped in and lay down for a few seconds, then stood up in satisfaction. Good, the measurements are correct. He turned slightly to the left and clicked another button. This time a small window of glass brightened up, showing 60 blue tubes of nutrition. Felix opened the window and lifted one of them. "One will last me for a week, which means I can stay inside the UVR for 60 weeks straight without worry about my health," he murmured. Although he could stay that long inside the UVR, Felix never planned on doing so, since he needed to keep integrating his bloodline from time to time. But that was only if he possessed the required Ramungandra bloodline. Otherwise, he could stay as much as possible inside until he found some. After a few minutes of checking the condition of the pod, Felix was quite satisfied by what he saw. He exited the pod and lifted it up like a feather, planning to install it in his bedroom. A few minutes later, he finished its installation and called for Layla and Jack to come to his room. Both of them were already near the hotel, so they didn't take much time to arrive. Felix brought them to his bedroom and showed them the pod. He then began explaining how he planned to spend those 3 months in the hotel. "This is a VR pod that I bought. I will use it to spend the majority of my time inside. So don't allow anyone to enter and bother me. I will call you whenever I am out. Understood?" "Yes, young Master Felix," they bowed their heads, trying their best to hide that a hint of envy after seeing the famous VR pod that could allow one to live as long as possible inside the UVR. But they didn't dare greed over it or disobey Felix, especially now after they spent a huge amount of effort to get into his good shoes. Felix excused them with a wave of a hand and removed all of his clothes. He then stepped inside the pod and lay peacefully. "Queen, please activates all of the pod systems." "How long do you plan to stay inside, Sir Felix?" "It depends on the situation." "All right, sir, the systems are on. You can start whenever you like." "Good, begin at once." Immediately after, a needle connected with a tube penetrated his left arm and started injecting the blue nutrition moderately. Since Felix was using the best of the best nutrients, he wouldn't need to urinate or defecates for the entire duration. Felix bought the best merely to avoid relying on the other unspeakable tubes under his rear, which were prepared for the broke poor users. Like Felix in his previous life, he never wanted to experience that horror again. Felix spawned in his newly bought standard house that had 2 floors and 1 basement. Felix spent a quite large sum on buying this house since it was within the inner circle of the capital city, where all of the centers, markets, and companies were concentrated. He would rather spend more coins on getting this one than to buy a cheap house on the outskirts of the city and spend more time traveling to reach the inner circle. Felix scanned the basic decor of the house and left it as it is without changing or adding anything. He preferred keeping things simple. He then stepped outside and locked the door shut, planning to head towards the Supremacy Games Administration office. Anyone who wanted to start his climb in the SG platform must first sign a strict contract in this office. A contract that presented all the rules, terms, conditions, rewards, and more of such during the participation in the games. A fully conclusive contract that had been modified over and over again for 1,000,000 years until a solid version without a single loophole had been created. This was how the players die in real life if they died in a game. The moment Felix signs, his life would be bound to the SG rules. Hence, if he died in a game, his consciousness which was connected to the Queen would be crushed by her without mercy. No one could escape this fate, not even the son of a race leader. The alliance kept going smoothly only due to those strict rules that were being enforced by the Queen AI. After a while, Felix got out of the hovering cab and stood in front of the unique-looking administration office. It was made of a 2-structure building. The first one designed in this shape completely made out of white glass, meanwhile the other structure was composed of black glass in the shape of ? Those were 2 letters from the common universal language and they meant SG in English respectively. In other words, they were abbreviations for Supremacy Games. Felix entered the ? shaped building, as this one was responsible for all the paperwork of the Alexander Kingdom SG branch. He passed through the line of participants who were queuing to join the deadly games, hoping to change their poor fate and strike rich. After all, if they won a single game they could wish for richness, and it would be fulfilled. As long as it was within reason. Felix stood in front of the receptionist and asked politely for the fastest appointment. "Sir, the earliest free appointment is 6 hours from now. Do you want to reserve it?" She asked professionally with a light smile. "Yes, please. I will pay up front for the services." Felix put his bracelet in the scanning device, and 100.000 SC was deducted from his bank account. This was merely the payment for signing the contract, nothing more, nothing less. This fee was added later to limit the newbies' large numbers surge. "Thank you, sir, for your cooperation. Do you wish to wait in the normal lounge or the VIP lounge?" she asked. "Neither, I am leaving. Goodbye." Felix immediately turned his back and left the building swiftly. He was not stupid to waste 6 hours doing nothing but paying for their expensive drinks and food. FIDDEU UPTS on NOV/E/LN.com. He would rather go to the training center and spend those 6 hours practicing his abilities and creating new methods of using them more efficiently. That was exactly what he did. After 20 minutes, the hovering cab stopped in front of the training center, which appeared just like a large-scale gym that had 80 floors with see-through glass windows, showing bloodliners either sparring with each other or practicing on machines, somewhat resembling the ones Felix used on the measurement center. Felix changed his formal clothes to a training outfit with a snap of a finger and walked to the training center. Sir, mind considering to join my club? It has rooms that have dummies AI with medium difficulty. Plus, our leader is a renowned first-stage bloodliner. Handsome, join my Diamond of Hearts club instead. It was founded by a group of beauties. Trust me, you will never feel lazy in their presence. I can promise you a date if you choose to join my limitless club. Please consider. Immediately after he stepped inside, he was surrendered by three cute girls chirping rapidly, each relying on their own techniques to steal his attention from their competitors. Felix looked at their hazy puppy eyes and firmly rejected their recruitment. No, thank you. Without waiting for the second round of harassment, he wiggled away from their clutches, heading towards the elevator. Tisk, impotent bastard. One of them left in irritation to hunt for other prey. Meanwhile, the girl who promised him a date pulled a mirror from her AP bracelet and touched her face gently while murmuring, "How can he resist my cuteness? I wasted 200.000 SC on modifying my face. Hee hee, your face is so fake, only a blind person would actually fall for you. Maybe you should stop promising them dates, you are creeping the newcomers away." The last girl that was beside her sneered and walked away, trying to seek another newbie. Seema! You be *TCH, I had enough of your insults. The girl did not back down, but took it a step further and threw the mirror at Seema's head. Bam! Ouch! Seema yelped in pain after the mirror made clear contact with her scalp, causing a small wound to open up right above her forehead. Blood drops began to slide slowly from the wound down her flushed red cheeks. You slut! You asked for it. Seema yelled furiously, and jumped on the girl, grabbing her hair viciously. Of course, her hair wasn't spared as well from being pulled and dragged around. Instantly, their fight turned into a hot catfight for the bloodliners on the first floor and the streetwalkers outside to spectate. No one broke them apart or bothered to report this to the management team. They merely gawked in enjoyment with lewd expressions at the two girls ripping each other clothes with their sharp nails. Felix, who indirectly started this, was nowhere to be found on the first floor, as he already took the elevator and reached the 21st floor. This time, only two males asked him if he wanted to join their clubs politely. Felix rejected them with a head shake, and they left him alone in peace after. Sigh, the competition for newcomers is really as fierce as ever. Felix sighed in frustration over having to deal with the upcoming tens of requirement offers, as he knew that in the training center, there were about 35 clubs or so ruling those 80 floors. In the earlier days, there were actually 80 clubs, each ruling one floor, but they were later either annexed and devoured by stronger clubs or merged with other ones to defend their training territory. This was how the training center was being operated now. The strong get more floors to train in and practice, while the weak could only get kicked out of the center due to lack of space. After all, there was only one training center in the entire capital city and it could not hold every bloodliner who wished to train peacefully. This was not like other companies or centers, where one just needed to wait in line for his turn, but a place where a bloodliner needs to earn his entry ticket by fighting his way through the floors, and the higher he climbs, the better the training equipment, rooms, and AI dummies he would find. Felix stopped at the 21st floor because he was positive he could win against a bloodliner here and take his place rightfully, without having to pass a club trails to secure a spot. Even though those clubs were ruling the floors, they were not working in a dictatorship system, where either you join them or scram. In fact, they operate on one rule: you want to train on a floor? Simply challenge one and take his spot, or pass our trails and secure one. Felix was planning on taking the challenge route. Confident, he cracked his knuckles forcefully while walking inside the noisy training floor. Who wants to be a good lad and give me his spot? He smirked, as he taunted everyone who was in his plain sight. Unfortunately, no one paid Felix any attention to his challenge, they simply carried on their training or chatting out loud with laughs and giggles thrown here and there. Their reaction was quite understandable, as in each day there were at least 10 bloodliners coming to challenge them. Were they supposed to act shocked and surprised each time someone made an entry? No one had the time or effort for that. It was much better to ignore the challenger and remain low-key to not be chosen and annoyed. Thus, Felix stood in front of the entrance with his eyelids twitching like a retard. His existence was utterly ignored. Without wasting a single second, he turned around and swiftly took the elevator to the 22nd floor. He did not have the face to remain there after his failed entrance. Better try with a new floor. The moment he entered the elevator, the noisy 21st floor went quiet for a few seconds, then out of nowhere, celebration cries were resounding thunderously. F***ck, it really worked. Hunin, you genius bastard, this idea of yours is really gonna help us lower the challenges to the limit. A young man with a red rooster hairstyle proclaimed excitedly. The hell? It actually turned out that they were relying on a technique to control the challenges and not because they were numb to taunts. True, no one will dare remain on our floor after they get shunned and ignored like this. You guys give me too much credit, I am simply tired of the constant challenges. Fuck, they always pick me for some reason. Hunin sighed in vexation. EAD new chapter S on no/v/e/ln.com. Everyone rolled their eyes in annoyance at his ignorance. After all, he was a 1.45 centimeters man with the face of a 12-years kid. Who wouldn't assume that he was the weakest based on his appearance? But Hunin didn't want to change or modify his persona, because he always said that he was more comfortable like this, which was honestly quite creepy. Alright, we will do a few more experiments, and if all is well, we will hide it from other clubs to not take advantage of it. A large man with a bushy beard and flat wooden Hummer on his shoulder suggested. Yes, leader, from now on we will only accept club applications, and challenges shall be ignored. A beautiful red-haired lady with long red sharp nails added coldly. Aff! Everyone called out loud, affirming the leader's decision. Clubs were using a voting system to decide every decision that affected them, since they were merely a group of random bloodliners protecting their training spots, nothing more, nothing less. The leader could not order them around like they were in an army. Every important decision must be voted on. Even after entering the elevator, bewilderment was still clouding Felix's face. He couldn't believe that his taunt, which never failed him before, did not manage to capture anyone's attention. Something weird is going on that floor. It's impossible for arrogant self-centered bloodliners who can't handle a single insult to simply vanish. Tiring! The elevator stopped and the door opened up slowly. Whatever, let's try it again. If it still does not work, it simply means the horrifying truth that arrogant pricks are extinct in this timeline. Felix shivered at that dreadful idea. After all, who was he going to bully and plunder if there was no one to offend him? Fortunately for him, the moment he stepped inside the packed floor and repeated his taunt, the expected pin-drop silence engulfed the floor. Whoosh! Suddenly, everyone turned their heads at the same time to see who dared to challenge them with such a ballsy claim. Felix was overjoyed after seeing their murderous gazes. That's it, my taunt is still as efficient as ever. He quickly added a side taunt to anger them even further. No one? Never mind then, might as well head upward. Your equipment is trash anyway. Felix turned around planning to walk towards the elevator. But before he took one step, a sudden roar assaulted his ears. Where the F***ck do you think you are going after belittling my floor like this? You came to challenge, then you better take your pick fast before I break the rules and throw you out of the window. A humongous man, resembling a giant with broad shoulders, bald head, and only one pierced ear threatened Felix with his booming voice. That's right, you better listen to the leader of Fire Saga Club, lest you find yourself on the ground floor broken like a doll. A monkey-like bloodliner with brown hair covering his entire body, and long bushy playful tail, urged Felix mockingly while hanging from the ceiling. I see, well I pick you then. I don't want to train while having your ugly face around me constantly. Felix fired a jab unexpectedly at the dumbfounded monkey who only wanted to kiss his boss's ass a little. He did not know that Felix only needed one person to speak, so he could target him. Haha, anyone who insults Monkey Lee is a friend of mine. If you manage to kick this bootlicking monkey from this floor, I will buy you a drink handsome. A gorgeous woman with long wavy pink hair and a ponytail hairstyle promised Felix with an alluring smile. The leader gave her a side glance but said nothing. F***ck, not fair Nora, I spent months asking you for a date and you always ignored me. So why would you promise this weakling? A good-looking man cried unjustly. Can you beat Monkey Lee? Nora asked scornfully. Cough, never mind, might as well hit on Melody, the man murmured under his breath, totally ignoring Nora after hearing her ultimatum. Felix glanced at Nora with interest and thought, what a bonus, might as well warm the newly bought bed tonight. Tonight 9 p.m. at the Widow restaurant, meet me there. Nonchalant, he gave her merely a side glance and continued eyeing the monkey dangling from the ceiling. Huh, confident, aren't you? You should focus on Monkey Lee first. He is the second strongest one on the floor after the leader. Nora giggled charmingly with a hand covering her mouth. The leader merely kept watching everything unfold silently, not interfering in the slightest. However, his eyes had a hint of gloom at the sight of Nora acting this way. Boy, I will make you regret picking me. Monkey Lee gave Felix an icy cold gaze and suddenly began jumping from a machine to another, heading towards a specific direction. Follow me, we will use my room as the arena. Without further ado, Felix chased after him, and soon after, he was followed by everyone on the floor. Those who were spectating and even those who were training in their room came as well after hearing about Nora's promise and a newbie challenging the second strongest bloodliner in their club. A few seconds later, Felix reached the monkey room and found that the door was already wide open. So, he stepped inside with extra vigilance, knowing that the moment he enters the room the challenge would officially begin. Whoosh! Just like he assumed, a massive tail, lashing at him speedily from his right direction, welcomed him immediately after stepping inside the room. Without a single shred of panic in his face, Felix crouched down with his head bent downwards, dodging the tail by a hair's skin. Crack! The bushy tail destroyed the wall after it missed its target. Such a heavy attack could have broken Felix's bones if it landed on him, or at least wound him badly. Felix took advantage of Monkey Lee's inability to instantly recall his tail, by gripping it forcefully with his right hand. He swiftly stood up and threw Monkey Lee slightly in the air, while simultaneously preparing a 180-degree full-powered round kick, aiming to strike Monkey Lee's head after gravity pulls him down. New. Thwog. A skull-crushing sound echoed in the room after Felix's 2800 BF kick made direct contact with the horrified face of Monkey Lee. Yet, that wasn't all, as Felix's kick was so strong, it forcefully sent Monkey Lee flying away, almost breaking the sound barrier. Boom! His body smashed right into the ceiling of the room, creating a monkey figure within it. The room was extremely wide, as it was almost the same as the one in the measurement center. Thus, Monkey Lee's body was thrown quite far distance. Irked, Felix dusted his hand from the bushy-tail strands with black lines on his forehead. Can't he buy strands fixation and save us from this revulsion? He questioned in irritation, but no one answered him. Those who were rushing here, hoping to watch either a great battle or one-sided thrashing from Monkey Lee, stood frozen in their place, not knowing how to react to the heart-wrenching sound of Lee's skull being fractured into small pieces and the following sound of his body colliding with the wall. They didn't see what exactly happened inside the room since the battle didn't last for even 2 seconds. It was too fast, it broke their senses and stunned them speechless. Was the one buried in the ceiling really Monkey Lee, the second strongest member of their club, or their eyes were playing tricks on them? They wondered to themselves. F.A. thud. Monkey Lee's body fell from the ceiling and smashed into the ground, lying there unmoving. After seeing his messed-up bloodied face, they felt a tide of varied emotions assault their minds. Disbelief, fear, excitement, and adoration, each bloodliner had a different expression, as they kept switching sight between Monkey Lee's body and Felix, who didn't stop cleaning his hands from the tail's hair for even a second. He truly didn't give a crap about the raging chaos he caused on those bloodliners' minds. They didn't know what integration percentage or stage Felix was on to destroy Monkey Lee in such a swift and brutal manner. However, they knew that Monkey Lee was a lesser purity first-stage bloodliner, and for him to lose from a single strike, they felt that Felix was at least a peak first-stage bloodliner or higher. This somewhat explained their varied expressions, as some of them couldn't understand why such a strong bloodliner was doing on their floor, where his real place should be at least on the 36th floor or so. Meanwhile, some didn't bother thinking about so in the slightest. In fact, their exciting expression entailed that Felix was probably going to get harassed by them to join their Fire Saga Club and protect their floor from their rivals' aggression. How could they miss inviting such a strong bloodliner that came by himself to their doorstep, while others weaker than him never bat an eye to their recruitment? One could only wonder how would they react if they found out that Felix was merely at lesser purity. Satisfied by Felix's showing, Nora smiled pleasantly while walking towards him with enticing steps. "Handsome, wear something nice tonight." She touched his AP bracelet and continued whispering softly in his ears, "I have added my chat ID inside your contacts. Make sure to call me later." She then left through the hungry pack of wolves that always desired her, but never tasted her before. After all, she was the third strongest bloodliner on this floor, with integration reaching almost the lesser purity of the first stage. And for them to lust for her without having the strength to even beat her properly, it was quite shameful, honestly. Felix glanced at her perky rear and thought, "I hope Asna doesn't wake up tonight and see * block me." Not waiting for the rest to hammer him with questions and inquires, Felix went towards Monkey Lee's corpse, planning to throw him outside his room, so when he revives 24 hours later it wouldn't be near him. Although dying wasn't possible in the cities and public hubs, the training center was a different matter entirely. Here, everyone was at risk of getting killed by anyone. Thus, if one wasn't confident in his strength, it was better to herd up with a club to receive protection. Otherwise, no one would give a crap if he got slaughtered during his training by a bloodliner that was having a bad day. Dying outside of the Supremacy Games might not result in real death, but still, one had to wait for 24H before reviving, not to mention having to a heavy fine to revive successfully. Thus, dying within the UVR wasn't really an outcome any Tom, Dick, and Harry could afford. "Close the door, AI," he ordered. The room AI followed his orders obediently and closed it shut in everyone's faces. The moment Felix won the challenge, the room became automatically his. "Sir Felix, which subscription plan do you wish to have with us, monthly or yearly?" she asked. "Yearly, please. That would cost you 200,000 SC. "Good, it's cheaper than monthly, considering 20,000 SC per month." Felix signed the holographic contract and paid for the subscription fee. In his previous life, he used to pay monthly, since he was not confident in his strength to defend his room from challenges. But now that he brutalized Monkey, the second strongest one on the floor, the news would spread quickly, which meant only a few were going to dare and challenge him. Unless they were at the second stage of replacement. But Felix wasn't worried about them at all, since they were mostly concentrated on the upper floors, where better equipment and rooms exist. It was not like Felix feared contesting with them or such, he merely wanted to avoid constant harassment, as he knew that competition in the upper floors was beyond wild. One should at least expect 5 challenges a day. Sometimes, it reached even 10 a day. For now, Felix wasn't interested in that at all. He only wanted to train his abilities in SG environments to remove his rustiness. "Did you connect the room to my AP bracelet?" he asked. Visit novilbin.c/m for the L-test updates. It was already done, sir. Felix thanked her and tapped on his bracelet, projecting a hologram interface that showcased 100 different types of environments, old game maps, and even real places like cities, famous mountains, deserts, and oceans. Inside the training room, Felix could modify or add anything as he pleased, either turning it into a 20-square-kilometer desert or bustling city filled with AI dummies that resembled humans. This was the reason entering the training center was necessary for any bloodliner. After all, having the ability to create any scenario one wanted to train in was too good to not fight for. After 10 minutes of constant modification, the entire environment of the room changed into a jungle with towering trees of different types, rivers long and wide splitting the jungle into 4 areas, and swamps hidden deep within the jungle. Felix didn't really put much thought into the map creation. He simply took an already made one and added some modifications to it. Please add 100 AI dummies with hard difficulty and put them randomly around the map, Felix ordered while stretching on top of a tree branch. Yes, sir. Do you want your location to be transmitted every 10 minutes, or just leave it as it is? Do so please, and stop the training after 5 hours. Now begin. He said the last command while jumping from tree to tree rapidly with ease. He didn't use the ground, as he wanted to stay on the high grounds in order to facilitate his scouting and also hiding. A couple of minutes later, he found 2 AI dummies standing alertly with their backs against each other. Felix did not ambush immediately but camouflaged himself by hiding behind the tree's leaves, wanting to surveil their action first. However, his expression turned dark instantly after seeing one of them had a finger on his left temple. A clear sigh of activating a mental type ability. He didn't know which one it was, and he wasn't planning on staying in his position to find out. Each mental ability had a fearsome effect either on the user or on the target. Hence, before the dummy got to activate it, he got interrupted by his ally, who pushed him away from an incoming light yellow bomb. Felix snapped his finger and covered himself in sleepiness white mist, trying to block the vision of the dummies. He jumped from the tree, free-falling while throwing 2 light yellow bombs at his target midair. The dummies on the ground rolled forward reflexively, dodging the incoming bombs without even lifting their heads. Poof! Poof! The bombs exploded behind them, leaving a cloud of light yellow mist. Yet, before the mist drifted away by the wind, Felix sent 4 more bombs, 2 from their right and 2 from their left. He already reached the ground and was only 12 meters or so away from them. The dummies' retreat paths were completely blocked. Behind them were 2 clouds of mist still in the air, and 4 more bombs were coming from both directions, leaving them only to step forward and approach Felix's aura. Yet, the dummies' expression remained composed as ever without faltering. They simply stayed in their position, eyeing the incoming bombs indifferently. Few moments before the bombs made contact with them, a sphere made of tree green leaves protected them entirely without a single opening for the poison to seep through. The bombs exploded on the sphere, leaving a large cloud of mist surrendering them. Felix's attack was utterly negated by 1 defensive active ability leave sphere. Nonetheless, Felix smirked at this sight and dashed closer until he entered the 8 meters radius. He then snapped his finger and the white aura withdrew rapidly through his pores, switching instantly to a light yellow mist, bursting from his body until it engulfed him and the 2 dummies inside. Still, he didn't stop, since the sphere was blocking the inducement from affecting them. So, he did the unexpected and grabbed a large rock, launching it at the sphere with his behemoth strength. Whoosh! The rock flew straight into the sphere, penetrating it from the front, and exited from the back without a single ounce of resistance. A rock thrown with 2,100 BF was not a joke. Felix's unexpected move rewarded him more than he asked for, as the mental type AI dummy who was within the sphere got interrupted again from activating his ability. If Felix used acid aura instead, the sphere might not have been corroded that swiftly, thus giving that dummy the few seconds he needed to activate his ability. For abilities that took time to activate, they were mostly ultimate abilities. The strongest of the bunch. Checkmate. Felix smirked as he saw light yellow mist enter the sphere. Afterward, it was an easy effort to kill them while paralyzed. The paralyze inducement might have a light yellow color, but it was in fact almost transparent. If one didn't pay close attention, they wouldn't even notice if they were inside Felix's aura or not. Sadly, that's exactly what happened to the dummies, as one was too focused on trying to reactivate his ability while the other was focusing on reinforcing the sphere. After a successful hunt, Felix immediately left the area, since the battle noise had probably alerted all dummies, which were near them. Plus his location would soon be transmitted to everyone, so he needed to be constantly on the move to avoid getting surrendered from everywhere. Felix never had the thought of fighting 100 all at once, that was just plain stupid and arrogant. No matter what difficulty the AIs were at, or how strong and unique his bloodline was, one active ability that he had no defense against could get him killed easily within the 100 of AIs. After all, they just needed to freeze him for 1 second, then bombard him with all of their offensive abilities. Felix was positive that his physical defense wasn't enough to protect him from that salvo. That's why one should always look for the safest path to victory and not the most dashing. After 5 hours of constant training within the jungle, Felix managed to kill 54 dummies out of 100, which was a huge achievement considering the short duration he had, plus those 100 dummies were all targeting him and not in a free-for-all battle style. But Felix still felt that he could have done better and killed all of them for merely 3 hours if he had the same shape in his previous life. A step by step, no need to rush. I will soon remove this rust and reach my peak form again. Felix said calmly while walking towards the door, planning to end his training for the day. His appointment with the administration office was almost due. Sir Felix, do you wish to save those modifications or return the room into its basic form again? The AI asked. Keep it like this, I still have not finished training in this format yet. He answered and stepped outside. As you command. The AI closed the door behind him, leaving the jungle that had bloodied bodies all over the place, untouched. Immediately after leaving the room, Felix was met with sneaky glances and peeks, or outright direct stares. He ignored those emotional looks that everyone was giving him and went straight to the elevator. The further he walked away from them, the louder their gossip got, to the point they were talking out loud by the time he entered the elevator. Does anyone know his name? A flamboyant-haired man asked the group he was in. Unfortunately, everyone shook their heads, having no idea who, why, and where did Felix come from. They assumed that he was either a visitor from another city in the kingdom, wanting to spend some time training here, or he just moved in and planned to remain here for a long time. Their assumption was based on the fact that Felix was a peak first-stage bloodliner, and for him to have such strength, yet never showed up before in the training center, only made them reach those two conclusions. That being said, they didn't care where he came from and for how long he planned on staying on their floor. The only thing that mattered to them was having him join their club to receive extra protection when a club challenges them for the floor's rulership. Unfortunately, they had no idea that Felix didn't give a crap about who takes command of the floor. As long as he beat the strongest in a club, he would always have his spot secured without entering those battles. Sigh. I sure do hope that Nora speaks some goodwill about our club, and invite him properly. Hee, I joined this club only due to Nora's beauty, so I doubt he will refuse if she actively recruited him. A tough-looking man with sharp long bones coming from his elbow joints answered with certainty. You too, Minty? I thought I was the only one who joined due to Nora. Someone exclaimed in surprise within the pack. What the hell, me too. I can't sleep at night without coming to the club at least once to see her. Added a tall thin man with a spellbound expression. Cough, I joined because of Melody. A rugged huff came out of a man who was benching 100 kilograms of weight in each hand. Me because of Becky. Fuck, how I wish I could grope her perky but just once. Suddenly every male on the floor followed after this group and started to confess their reasons for joining the club. Sadly for the girls, none of them were proper. The girls left the public training hall and entered their rooms, not wanting to dirty their ears anymore by those shameless bastards. As the men were chatting out loud with lecherous faces, a rigid voice interrupted them. Did none of you guys join because of my strength? Everyone's faces turned instantly black after seeing their silent giant leader cracking his knuckles while standing next to the entrance. Clearly, blocking their escape. Sigh, you guys are really immoral and despicable to speak about our sisters like this. I abhor being mentioned in the same breath as you. Disappointed, the flamboyant-haired man kept shaking his head as he approached the leader, trying to stand next to him like a faithful dog. Too bad, his plan just made it worse for him as the giant's hand clutched his head and lifted him from the ground effortlessly. Ouch, ouch, ie. My skull is being crushed, leader. Put me down, please. He bellowed miserably while his hands were trying their best to free his head. Sadly, his penny strength couldn't nudge a single finger. Do you take me for a fool, Leorio? I was watching you from the beginning, bragging loudly that you touched Melody's ass. Daring to even defame your sisters now? The leader raised Leorio until they were face to face and offered him a warm smile. Let me give something to brag about later. Whoosh! Without warning, he hurled Leorio by his head like a cannonball through the open window. Everyone felt a sudden chill course their spine as they listened to Leorio's screech, nose-diving from the 22th floor. F.A. thud. A body fell straight on a moving hover car, breaking its front glass window entirely and scaring the shit of the driver, who was FaceTiming his wife with his bracelet. What was that flesh-clapping sound, dear? Are you cheating on me again in the UVR? And you even dare to FaceTime me while doing so? I will fucking cut your D*CK off if you don't log out now. His insecure crazy wife immediately connected the crushing sound to an obscene sound in her mind with absolutely no common sense. The poor man's entire week was ruined wrongly by Leorio's vulgar bragging remark. Aggrieved, he could only try to pacify his wife with watery eyes over this injustice. In the SG administration office, Felix was waiting in the lounge for his appointment patiently. A few minutes later, he was called for earlier than he expected, which only meant that the bloodliner that was inside the room read and signed the contract faster than the anticipated duration. Felix walked unhurriedly towards the elevator and clicked on the 4th floor button. A few seconds later, he stepped inside the floor and knocked on the 3rd room that was on his right side. Come in, please. An aged voice responded to his knock. Felix opened the door gently, not daring to act without manners in the presence of SGA's official. Even though this was merely a branch in a human kingdom, Felix still needed to show the correct attitude when dealing with anyone in the SGA governance circle, whether outer or inner, lest he gets refused entry to the games based on some bullshit reason. Hello, sir, I am here to sign the participation contract. Felix bowed his head slightly and straightaway said his purpose. Please, take a seat, son, first. The elderly offered warmly after seeing Felix's respectful approach. After all, no one would slap a smiling person. Thank you, sir. Felix sat down and waited for the elderly to give him the contract. Here you go. The official sent him a holographic thick contract that would take hours of time to just read it properly. He then added, you can ask me about anything that you don't understand. FIDDEU UPTS on N, O, V/E/LN.com. Felix thanked him for his offer, but he did not bother to even take a look at the contract. He simply asked the Queen AI to compare this contract with the SGA public contract in the database. After a few seconds, he received a confirmation that everything was exactly the same. So, he signed it without a single ounce of hesitation. He trusted the Queen's judgment more than he trusted his. The official opened his mouth slightly, wanting to say something after seeing Felix's rashness, but he closed it and thought to himself, whatever, it's even better this way than to waste my time for another 6 hours explaining the same things again. Welcome to Supremacy Games, son. He stood up with a kind elderly smile and offered Felix a handshake. Thank you. Felix shook his hand with a smile and left the room after, not wasting the elder's time by flattering him needlessly like the majority of bloodliners who came before him. They always believed that a SGA's official could help them out a little during the games. Too bad, no one had a hand on the games, except for the unbiased Queen. Bribing SGA's official was just giving them free money and gifts. They wouldn't refuse the good gesture, but they sure would bail out if asked to give some leeway during the games. Good luck in the games, you will need it desperately. The elderly murmured softly while eyeing the closed door. He then called for the receptionist to send the next appointment. One could only wonder if he wished for good luck to all the bloodliners who left his room or not. Felix did not return to his house or training center after leaving the office. Rather, he went to a hover car dealership to buy one for himself. Since it was quite shameful to own a house within the inner circle of the capital without a vehicle in the garage. Plus, he started to get annoyed by riding hover cabs whenever he needed to go somewhere. Therefore, Felix spent the next half an hour browsing and testing cars, each with their own style and price tag. In the end, he purchased a classy thin dark hover car that was neither cheap nor flamboyant. Just a casual ride that offered everything necessary without being looked down upon. The last thing he wanted was for a nouveau rich second-generation kid to ruin his night with Nora by insulting his car. After test driving it around the city for an hour, his rusty driving got better and better until his wild driving skills from his previous life resurfaced again. After having his fun, he stopped and returned to his house to groom himself for the evening. 10 minutes later. Felix was humming happily in the shower, clearly in a good mood. He was finally going to ease his surpassed desire that was eating him up since the moment he was reborn. He refused to touch himself no matter what. Not because he thought that it was beneath him, rather, it was because of Asna that could read his memories. He was goddamn certain that she would roast him alive after finding out. Speak of the devil and he shall arrive. Asna, who spent most of her time asleep, woke up by his delightful humming. She smelled his happiness like a hungry shark smelling blood from a mile away. How could he be happy in her presence? The nerve! Oh. My dear Felix is having a date without waking me up. She pouted, how can you not wake me up during such a fun event? Immediately after hearing her damned voice, Felix stopped humming at once with parted lips, not knowing how to respond to her teasing. The only thing he felt inside the warm shower was a coldness, bone-chilling coldness, like he was standing at the top of a mountain fully nude. He knew his night was about to be ruined. Asna giggled teasingly after seeing Felix's deadpan face, like he just heard the most heart-wrenching news in his life. Why are you upset? I also want to watch how you humans do it. Can't I do so? She asked, sulking. Asna, you have tons of my memories, I did it with hundreds of girls there. You can watch as much as you like. He requested with a pitiful look like a homeless dog, just leave me alone in this evening. Pretty please? He truly was desperate to get laid for him to beg Asna like this. Felix held his breath, hoping that Asna wasn't in her B*TCHY mood and accept his request maturely. Unfortunately, that wasn't happening anytime soon. As long as she was stuck in his consciousness, her B*TCHY mode would always be on. Nope. I want to watch everything live. Who knows, I might even assist you in pleasing her. Asna rejected his proposal with a playful grin. F*CKK my life. Felix could only cry out in despair after realizing that the greatest third wheel in the universe was living right inside of him. And she was hell-bent on ruining his night with Nora. After knowing that Asna wasn't going to leave without a bribe, Felix folded with slumped shoulders. Just tell me what you want, so you can leave me alone. Asna immediately laid out her condition after seeing Felix took a step back. I simply want you to visit me here. She reminded him with a displeased tone. After all, you already can access your consciousness manually. She kept waiting for Felix to pay a visit by himself, but to no avail. He never spoke about it, never bothered thinking about it. She really couldn't handle it anymore. She prepared so many techniques and ways to seduce and harass him, but the jerk never bothered to even come to take a look at her. Felix's heart skipped a beat, but he still answered without a stutter, "Oh yes. I totally forgot about manual activation." He gave a forced laugh. I was waiting foolishly until I reach origin purity to enter automatically. Skeptical and a bit wary, Asna raised an eyebrow after noticing something fishy about his response. But she didn't mull over it too much. In her mind, as long as he agreed to enter, she would charm him silly with her beauty the moment his eyes lands on her. Ah, so. She yawned and covered herself with the blanket. Keep your promise tomorrow. Have fun with that ugly duckling. Afterward, she cut the connection off from his mind. Felix sighed in relief after she left. He suddenly lost his eagerness toward his date after comparing Asna's beauty with Nora's. Sign, if I keep this unfair comparison with every woman I meet, I will really stay single forever. He turned off the water and dried himself up using a towel. He then went in front of the mirror and opened a VR store. He clicked on the close button and browsed the multiple different male outfits inside the gallery. Not this one. Definitely not this. He kept scrolling down, while from time to time enlarging a holographic outfit to check closely, but soon he shakes his head and continues to scroll. After testing 6 to 7 outfits, he decided to settle with a semi-formal outfit. He picked a combination from the gallery and snapped his finger. Instantly after, his naked body got covered from bottom to top with his desired outfit. Black leather shoes, slim blue marine pants, and a dark tight shirt outlining his muscles, without a suit jacket. Felix observed his new look and gave a slight head nod in praise. He then rolled his shirt sleeves to his elbows, exposing his forearms. Now it's perfect. Discover NW Chapter SNN0EL. Buy.com. Afterward, he clicked purchase on the menu and closed the VR shop after a successful transfer. Felix glanced at his bracelet and found that he still had 15 minutes left before his date. Thus, he spent it modifying his messy hairstyle into a different one. In the end, he went with a smooth low-fade hairstyle. As for the hair color, he switched to his real one, spring green with dark purple tips. 8:55 p.m. in the Widow restaurant. Felix sat at a dimly lighted table that was in the center of the restaurant, surrounded by tens of tables, each taken by a couple. Nora was sitting right in front of him. She came wearing a tight-fit red dress that highlighted her assets glamorously. Plus, with her long wavy pink hair and light makeup that brightened her antique ruby eyes and glossy lips, one could easily infer that she came prepared for this date. Felix had to admit that Nora was really attractive when compared to other females, except for Asna, of course. However, he did not know if this was merely her disguise that she used to charm males or her real outlook, and he honestly didn't care about it. This was the UVR where people were supposed to unleash their desires that were bound by morals and laws in reality, not a place where one sought true love. If one wanted to identify his gender as a unicorn in the UVR, no one would stop him. This meant people could actually change genders freely. That being said, one needed to first pay a hefty fine to change genders. However, those desperate would pay it in heartbeat, even if they had to take a loan. To sum everything up, if someone tried to seek love in the UVR, he could only blame his own stupidity after getting catfished by a 300-pound male who paid a fortune to appear as a gentle lowly. Felix raised his glass of wine and took a small sip while admiring Nora's beauty, who was smiling beautifully with her glossy red lips. "Nora, I have to say, you truly outshone all of the ladies in the restaurant tonight." He praised her with a chuckle as he pointed out the envious looks girls and men around them kept sending. Amused, Nora took a peek and laughed softly after seeing that he was right. "I disagree with you. I think that they are looking at your handsome visage, not me." She returned his praise with flattery of her own. She then asked him the first question that must be asked on the first date in UVR. "On the scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate the resemblance between your real image and your VR persona?" "I guess 2. Maybe even 3. Felix replied casually. Nora yelped in surprise. She assumed that based on Felix's strength he should have a quite good background, so he didn't need to modify his face heavily for safety. Felix chuckled lightly after seeing her surprised, Pikachu face. "I am simply too scared that I will be harassed constantly by women if I change to my real face, that's all," he said sincerely. Speechless, Nora could only look at his sincere eyes, not knowing how to respond to his shamelessness. "How about you? How do you scale yourself?" Felix asked her. "Of course 10 out of 10, this is my real face," Nora answered with an annoyed pout. Felix merely looked at her indifferently and said, "Prove it." Nora realized that Felix did not believe her claim, but she didn't worry about it. She gave him a victorious smile while showing him a holographic picture of her real self. Focused, Felix squinted his eyes at the picture. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrow in surprise after seeing her and the giant leader of the club in one picture with a large spaceship in the background. But just to be sure, he asked in his mind, "Queen, run a full scan on the picture and see if there are any modifications." A second later, the Queen replied that the picture was real. Felix lifted his head and blinked his eyes at Nora, who was giving him a praise-me look, and said while pointing at the giant leader, "What's your relationship with this gorilla?" Nora gave him a dirty glance and threatened him. "Don't call my gentle brother a gorilla, lest he finds out and throws you from the window." "I doubt he will be able to." He laughed. "Are you saying that you can defeat my brother? Just for your information, he is a league apart from that monkey." She added in vexation, "The only reason he is on the 22th floor is because he is worried about leaving me alone." Felix laughed at her after understanding her plight. "You probably had a tough time with men due to his overprotection." Nora lowered her head in shame after being found out. No matter how much she tried to act charming and mature, her big brother was always watching her closely. She couldn't even act freely within the UVR, don't even mention in real life. However, she soon raised her head and said coquettishly, "Aren't you afraid of him? After all, I sneaked outside for this date, but soon he will find out that I truly met with you, and he will not like it one bit." She added in ridicule after remembering the fate of the last man who took her on a date without his approval. The last man, who was sitting in your position, had his jewels destroyed in the UVR, as well as in the real world. She sneered, "What shamed me more was the fact he didn't fight for my hand but knelt and begged for forgiveness." Her coquettish persona instantly changed into an arrogant cold one and asked Felix while pointing a butter knife at him, "Are you going to shame me in front of my brother like the other, or prove me that you are worthy of my company?" "Worthy? Worthy?" She truly shouldn't have used this word in the presence of Felix. Alas, it was already too late. Felix did not answer her, he just sighed and stood up after hearing about those details, which honestly ruined his appetite and his desire for her. He took one last sip from the wine glass and put it on the table. He then arrived near the confused Nora and lifted her chin with one finger, making her stare at his face that was in the process of changing to almost resembling his real face. "Nora, you disappointed me greatly tonight," he whispered in her ears with an upset tone. "I expected a nice evening with each other that may end hopefully with both of us pleased. But here you are talking about your big brother breaking men's balls, and me shaming you in front of him." Spellbound, Nora stared at Felix's enlarged slits, which kept emitting a mesmerizing vibe under the dim light of the table, and could only breathe heavily near his face without interrupting him. "I'm afraid that your beauty and charm is still inadequate for me to prove myself to your brother or anyone in that case." He gave her a cold smile and ordered, "So forget about this night, and don't approach me in the club again, okay?" Without waiting to hear her response, Felix turned around and walked away, heading towards the restaurant exit. Each step he took changed his facial visage until he left through the door with his usual above-average look. Nora's hazy eyes never left Felix's back, even after he left the restaurant. To this point, no one in the restaurant knew what happened between them to end their evening this early. Nora was one of them as well. She still had no idea how did she offend Felix. However, the way he treated her was a brand new experience in her life. Her overprotective brother and the men who had some balls to approach her only treated her like a princess. Especially after seeing that her beauty was real and not fabricated like 90% of the women in the UVR. In their minds, she was a keeper, and for keepers, one must always treat them nicely and fulfill all of their desires. That was exactly how Nora was treated throughout her life. Yet, now a rogue had shown up, a rogue who gave absolutely no crap about her beauty or getting at her good books. A rogue whose face was more charming than her, especially his cold dark violet serpent-like eyes. She saw nothing like them before, and just remembering them made her heartbeats race and her body to heat up. She didn't know why her body was feeling hot, and she wasn't going to stay in the restaurant all by herself to find out. She stood up as well and left the restaurant with flushed red cheeks. The couples didn't know if it was due to her shame, humiliation, or rage at being left alone. But after she left, the waiter swore that her chair was damp a little. After leaving the restaurant, Felix rode his car and drove back home in irritation over wasting his time with a lost cause. Prove himself? He scoffed as he drove speedily in the main road, heading towards his house. She honestly thought that she was worthy of having him, a primogenitor bloodline user, bow his head to her brother to get his approval for her hand? He laughed in ridicule at her far-fetched fantasy. In his eyes, the only one worthy enough for him to try that hard was a girl that had Asna's beauty and not her shitty personality. As for other females? Forget it. Explore Tati stories at no/l/bin.cm. They wouldn't even be able to catch up to him, even if he slowed his bloodline advancement. The moment he chose this path, his destiny to find a human woman compatible with him was already doomed. His love interest got limited to only a few races that were worthy of being by his side in his long journey. As for others? To put it heartlessly, they were merely burdens. This was why Felix only searched for a nightstand to ease his desire, but never a full commitment. Plus Felix had literally billions of secrets to hide, so how was he supposed to do so while being in a relationship? He honestly didn't want to lie every day to his woman. Such a toxic relationship he wanted none of. Might as well hunt in clubs or bars and stop bothering with those princess mentality types. He thought to himself while parking his car in the garage. A few minutes later, Felix sat in the living room with his leg above the other while clicking on a holographic screen in front of him with a serious expression. After a while, he finished and called for the queen. I am done filling in the information form, you can apply for my participation now. Sir Felix, are you certain that you want to apply using an anonymous persona? She asked. Yes, please, I want all of my private information to be blocked from everyone. He nodded his head and said, also, add that I won't accept interviews during the games. As you wish, Sir Felix. A few seconds later, she informed him that his application had been successfully approved by the SGA. I suggest for you to reread the rules, sir, if you plan to join the games now. She advised with good intentions. Thank you, Queen, but I am already familiar with them, so there is no need. He smiled. All right, sir, good luck on the games. Felix nodded his head and opened his profile interface. He kept scrolling down the basic info until he stopped at a new game start. Congratulations on picking vehicle format hover cars death race current game mix button. A moment later, a random combination of the three colors dyed the standard car, turning it into a badass-looking serpent with its frontal jaw wide open ready to devour anything. Satisfied with this version, Felix didn't continue mixing the colors anymore, he just pressed save and closed the interface while yawning with a hand covering his mouth. After getting everything done, he immediately went to sleep. Tomorrow was a big day for him. He would test drive this car in his training room using a Solaria planet-based environment to practice thoroughly. After all, that's what those 5 days of preparation were for. Next morning 9 a.m. Felix was eating breakfast in his kitchen while having the SG website hologram in front of him. Queen, please input those keywords in the search bar: bronze, silver, Milky Way galaxy, hover car death race game. He requested while sipping coffee from a mug. A few moments later, the official website page of SG was replaced by a small list that had 6 games. Felix viewed those games and clicked on the one that's about to start 5 days later, which was the one he was at. Immediately after doing so, the public details of the game that were open for everyone were displayed before him. Felix ignored obvious details that he already saw yesterday and focused on the players list. / players list. Fire Torch _1544, bronze mid-tier wins 1/ losses 6. For more details, click on the name. Magnificent Scent _544, silver, low tier, wins 3/ losses 4. For more details, click on the name. Holy Trinity _774, unranked, wins 0/ losses 3. For more details, click on the name. Absolute Vision, silver, mid-tier, wins 5/ losses 3. For more details, click on the name. Unpaid Landlord _6996, unranked, wins 0/ losses 0. For more details, click on the name. Echo Wave _3478, bronze low tier, wins 0/ losses 4. For more details, click on the name. Mighty Monka _4555, unranked, wins 0/ losses 2. For more details, click on the name, // Felix found his name buried in the middle of the list and clicked on it. Immediately after, he was transferred to his profile that was open for everyone. After seeing that everything was the same as yesterday, he nodded in satisfaction. One could never be too paranoid in such cases that were tied to life and death situations. So Felix had to double-check to ease his mind. Might as well scout for those that can be a threat in the game. Felix glanced at the time and found that it was still early to head to the training center, so he decided to mark the players that might turn to be variables. Although this game had most players in bronze rank or unranked newbies like Felix, he still had to be careful when dealing with them. One of them might just be a beast in driving and lucked out on this game. Just as expected, his scouting turned to be successful after finding out a contender, who went by the name EasyWind _1664 had a victory in a vehicle racing format before. Even though the game is not the same, but still I'd better have my guard against him. Felix closed the holographic screen and cleaned the dishes for his breakfast. Despite not needing to eat or clean the dishes in the UVR, he still preferred doing so, as it gives a better sense of realism. 20 minutes later, he changed into his practice outfit and drove towards the training center. Felix stood in the corner of the elevator indifferently while next to him was surprisingly Nora. She kept sneaking peeks at him each couple of seconds with crimson cheeks. Becky, who was in the elevator with them, kept looking back and forth between Felix and Nora with a finger resting on her lips. Did something happen during last night's date? I need to find out. My gossipy senses are tingling. She thought to herself as she continued to stare at those two. Abruptly, she walked from her corner and stood in front of Felix. She raised her head slightly, staring at his eyes, and offered a beautiful smile. "What's your name, handsome?" she asked. Felix lowered his head and smiled politely at the short, busted girl. "Felix, nice to meet you, sister." Becky offered her light-tanned hand for a handshake and introduced herself warmly. "I am Becky Melliford, nice to meet you as well." Felix shook her hand and nodded politely. Nora peeked at their interaction and felt quite uncomfortable about it. But she could only bury that feeling and act disinterestedly toward them by suspiciously playing with her hair and looking at the elevator ceiling. Becky glimpsed at her actions speechlessly. "Girl, can you step up your act a bit? You are embarrassing yourself." Meanwhile, Felix never bothered to even give Nora a glance. He treated her just like air in the elevator. He was dead serious about what he told her on their date. A few moments later, they reached the 22th floor and stepped inside. "See you later, Becky." Felix waved his hand with a mild smile and walked ahead of them towards his room. Becky chased after him quickly and touched his bracelet. She then went back to Nora, who was staring daggers at her for some reason. Felix heard the notification that a new ID had been added to his UVR chat contacts and continued walking towards his room unbothered. Now was not the time to flirt around, but to focus on his upcoming game. Felix must ace those next 4 placement games to be placed straightaway in peak silver tier. If not, he would take a huge amount of time to climb from bronze to silver then gold, since there was a 2-month break period after each game. This rule had been added the moment the participation became a public affair. Simply because there were millions of new players joining the games each day, and without this kind of limitation, the platform would destroy itself after not being able to handle the players spamming games every single day. The Queen with her behemoth processing power would still fail to handle all of this data at the same time. Plus, the games would flood the platform, confusing the spectators on which one was good to watch. Most importantly, the Alliance didn't have an infinite number of prizes to reward that massive number. Therefore, this rule was a must to keep the stability of the platform. Heck, as we speak, the SGA Rules Committee was looking for a way to increase the duration without offending the hardcore players, who try to climb the ranking ladder as fast as they could. After a couple of hours, Felix had successfully modified his room to have a racing track within the Solaria planet environment. The entire room turned into a furnace with a heat surpassing 58 degrees Celsius, due to the 3 suns above the room. Felix replicated exactly everything that the Solaria planet was known for in his racing track, ranging from massive suns, cracked land, and deep canyons to deserts and even volcanoes. He did so because the game details only mentioned the planet and not the exact environment. So he had to improvise and mix everything together to have a complete exercise. Upstat from N0/V/LB/.co/M. Felix wiped his sweaty palms with a towel and entered his car that seemed more like an oven in this hellish heat. Ah! Ah! The moment he sat on the leather seat, he yelped in pain and jumped outside the car with smoke rising from his ass. F***CK, my ass would be cooked before the game even starts. Irritated, he snapped his finger quickly and the burnt marks on his ass cheeks were healed. After doing so, he reopened the customization interface and clicked on the interior of his car. Then he pressed on the standard leather seats and replaced them with heat-absorbing ones. But he did not stop there, as he felt the inside of the car was too stuffy. Thus, he upgraded the air conditioner of the car to ease breathing inside a little. Alright, those minor modifications will probably pass through the rebalancing checkup easily, he said casually while pressing on save. Instantly, the car interior seats were changed to icy blue leather seats. Felix sat on them and his ass was greeted with a coolness that eased his tense expression. He then closed the door and activated the upgraded air conditioner that did not fail his expectations, as the stuffy atmosphere in the car was replaced with warmness. Ah, such a bless. Felix exhaled in comfort while wearing the seatbelt on. After double-checking everything, he nodded his head in satisfaction and ignited the engine. Momentary after, the car hovered slightly above the ground without letting a single sound. After all, the hover car was relying on anti-gravity technology to fly, instead of using multiple thrusters at the bottom to uplift it. There were only 2 thrusters, and they were at the back of the car responsible for its acceleration. That being said, the car could only reach a max of 100 meters above the ground. Any higher and the anti-gravity technology would turn null, forcing the car to drop down into its rightful range. Felix clutched the steering wheel that resembled an airplane yoke and pulled it slightly towards him. The hover car responded simultaneously and uplifted itself higher. Felix smirked while pushing the accelerator to the limit. Whoosh! The sound of wind could be heard as Felix's hover car sped away, leaving only a cloud of brownish dust behind him. Felix spent the next 12 hours continuously running laps around the track. The first lap was warm-up, but after that, he added 50 AI to race with him, just like the number of the players. He wanted to set the AI at the extreme difficulty to make the race hell, but sadly only the upper floors had those kinds of advanced AI dummies. So he had to settle for hard difficulty. However, they still made the race near impossible to win for Felix, since all of them ganged up on him the moment the race began. Felix, after taking a beating for the first couple hours without any way to resist the salvo of abilities and vehicles ramming into him, folded and returned the race to a normal setting, which was free for all. His arrogance was quickly curbed and decided to race obediently like expected. Thus, the following hours were spent on finding unique ways to take advantage of the 4 launchers he added to his car by using his abilities. Some worked just fine, while some outright failed and caused him to lose some races. That's how the first day of practicing went, some wins, some losses. But Felix was never worried about this instability since he still had 4 more days to work things out. Felix left the training center and walked towards his parked car while spinning the key around his finger with a lax attitude. Yet, he soon sighed helplessly after seeing Nora leaning on his car door, blocking him from entering the driver's seat. If only abilities were allowed to be used in public, he would have paralyzed her and drove away. Sadly, he could only stare at her indifferently, waiting for her to understand the situation and leave. Nora flinched slightly from his cold stare and tightened her thighs closely to each other. Felix gazed at her weird behavior and instantly understood her type. He then grinned slightly and thought, I might as well tame her when I'm free, but for now, she can only curb her desire until I deal with my priorities. Felix walked forward step by step until he was face to face with Nora. He stared right in her eyes, yet, she kept avoiding making eye contact with him. Are you going to let me enter my car, or should I call the enforcers to take you away? Felix threatened her coldly. Nora breathed ruggedly from her parted lips after hearing his cold voice. She wanted to replay, but she couldn't say anything as her thoughts were in a complete mess. What's happening to me? Why do I get aroused each time he treats me badly? Is it just because of him, or was I always like this? Unfortunately for her, Felix didn't have the time to wait until she figured out her true self. He squeezed her cheeks until her red plump lips resembled a blowfish mouth and ordered her frigidly, "Be a good girl and enjoy yourself in the side. Don't block my way." Speechless, he immediately released Nora's cheeks as he saw that her eyes were about to roll back in her head. "Hoagie!" An unexpected soft moan escaped from Nora's parted lips as she slid into the floor and sat with her legs twitching from time to time. "Already? The hell, I barely did anything." Felix glanced at her quivering legs, intrigued over her sensitivity. In his previous life, he dealt with quite a few girls such as her type, but all of them needed more than what he just did to even get off. "Whatever, I will deal with her after the game," he thought one last time while Princess carrying her to the training center. After putting her near the door of the center, he instructed the queen to log her out. The queen AI checked on her condition and found out she would be endangered to assaults if stayed in the UVR in such a condition. So she activated the emergency log out protocol. After seeing her disintegrate into light particles, Felix cleaned his sticky wet hand that accidentally touched her thigh and walked back to his car. The moment he sat on the driver's seat, those distracting thoughts were completely uprooted from his head. The only thing he should be thinking now was how to win the game. Nothing more, nothing less. Unfortunately, that seemed too big of a wish today, as he remembered that another vixen was waiting for his visit today. A vixen, far more dangerous than the obedient Nora. Felix had to have full control of his emotions and body reaction after he sees Asna's otherworldly beauty. Otherwise, he would never hear the end of it. Inside the consciousness lake. Felix stood up while massaging his temples to ease up the dizziness that follows always after entering this place. A couple of seconds later, he began moving towards the mist mansion. He did not wait for Asna to force him to enter, instead, he preferred to do so while she was still asleep. So he could build his immunity one last time before the fateful meeting. After entering through the gate, he saw that the bed was still in the same position. However, Asna was not sleeping on it. Before he could exclaim at his ruined plan, a sudden hug greeted him from behind. "Ah, people's touch. I never felt it since the moment I was sealed." Asna murmured softly while hugging Felix with her eyes closed in contentment. Felix's heartbeats accelerated a notch, but he quickly suppressed his emotions to the limit to stop them from increasing any further. He then relaxed his stiff muscles and enjoyed her hug as well. For a breathtaking beauty such as Asna to hug him by her will, it was truly a chance not to be passed on. And so, both of them kept in the same position for a couple of minutes, not saying a single word to break this atmosphere. Suddenly, Asna opened her closed eyes, exposing a crafty glint. "Initial step has gone smoothly. Now I just need to turn his head slowly and stare at his eyes, and he will be mine." Asna did exactly as she planned. She first broke off from the hug and held Felix's neck between her long pale fingers. Then, she turned his head gently to face her while having the most charming smile she could muster. However, that was as far as her plan took her. As, immediately after Felix faced her, he crushed her heart and arrogance with merely one sentence that he practiced thousands of times just for this moment. "Meh, I have seen better." Asna almost spat blood on his face after hearing him disparage her beauty to such a degree. She never expected, not in a million years, to receive such a lackal.u.s. reaction to her beauty that she took pride in. She looked at his slight smug smile and wanted nothing more but to bash his face with her elbow. However, she suppressed her anger and continued her plan. If he thought that was all she had in her pocket, he would be dead wrong. She suddenly felt faint and leaned on his body. She laid her head on his chest and started to breathe softly with flushed cheeks. Felix caught her between his arms and said in irritation, "I know what you are doing, Asna, but you can stop now. You won't be able to charm me no matter what." He looked at her quivering eyelashes with a warm smile and said, "After all, your age is 20 million years old or above." Asna instantly froze in his arms like an electric shock coursed through her body after hearing him mention her damned age. But Felix did not stop hitting her where it hurts, as he added with a disheartened tone, "To actually try to seduce a 17-year-old kid while you are as old as the universe. You truly make me look down on you, Asna." He patted her stiff shoulders gently and promised, "Don't worry, this will not affect our partnership. After all, everyone has flaws." After seeing that she wasn't responding to anything, neither his words nor his touch, he carried her stiff body and put her in the bed. He pulled the blanket up until only her deadpan face was left in the open. Afterward, he squatted next to her face and popped her nose affectionately with his finger. "It was good seeing you at last, Asna. Even though I expected an old hag, I have to say." He paused for a bit as he saw a small shimmer was still burning in her eyes. He offered the warmest smile he could muster and said, "My expectations were not off the mark." Asna's last shimmer died instantly at his brutal remark. She just continued to lay on the bed motionless with her yellowish eyes darkened. Felix closed her eyelids with 2 fingers like he was doing it to a corpse. Then, he exited the consciousness with a satisfied smirk on his face. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience. Please click #SVictory yet at what cost _4745682811570705 for visiting. In this battle, he emerged victorious over Asna. All of his preparations and defense building was for this moment. He wanted to utterly shatter any future attempts by Asna on him. He didn't want to be teased and harassed each time he visited his consciousness. Hell, if he wasn't this heavy-handed on her, the next time he pays her a visit, Asna would probably welcome him wearing sexy lingerie in her bed to seduce him and manipulate him. God knows how long his rationality would last before his primal instinct takes over and force him to do things he would regret. But now she wouldn't dare do so anymore after being called a grandma who was trying to seduce a kid. Felix wanted to have a normal conversation with her, but that wouldn't happen if she kept doing those shenanigans. So, the only solution was to hit her most prized beauty heartlessly until she would question either his manhood or that her perfect beauty was flawed somehow. Still, mentioning her true age was a salty move he wasn't proud of. Alas, what's done is done. Felix only hoped that it was worth it. For days quickly passed by, as Felix spent them wholly on doing only one thing, and that was to practice in his room until he dropped in the ground exhausted. Meanwhile, Nora always tried to strike a conversation by following him everywhere like a puppy. But, Felix ignored all of her attempts and even blocked her ID chat after getting spammed with her messages. Nora's extreme methods to approach Felix began to raise some weird rumors on the floor. The men believed that Felix did her and stopped caring about her, while the girls gossiped that Nora fell for Felix but he was not interested in her. The only one in the club who had a different opinion about this farce was the giant leader, Nora's brother. He believed that his dear sister was bullied by Felix and he must break his jewels to set an example for others in the club. Unfortunately, he never found a good chance to confront Felix without appearing as a bully. After all, he was a peak stage 2 bloodliner, while Felix was assumed to be at peak stage 1 in his opinion. Days went by, and he kept watching his sister following Felix everywhere like his maid without being able to do anything about it. One could only imagine the bolted rage inside of him currently, simply waiting for the day it would explode on Felix without giving a crap about the consequences. That day was approaching, as the only thing left was the fuse to light up the giant. Meanwhile, Asna cut off the connection between them completely and never spoke again. Felix expected as much from her. It would be weird if she didn't throw some kind of tantrum after he brought her to dirt from her high superiority seat. But he didn't care currently if she remained offline since he already reached 100% affinity enhancement long ago, while his bloodline integration had reached a dead end after not finding any Remungandrasens in the previous bloodlines he purchased. So, he decided to give her time to cool off until he pays her another visit and see if she was going to have a normal conversation with him or try to charm him again. Felix stood in front of the mirror while changing his current disguise to another one that would be exclusively used for the games. He already spent 3 hours, but still was not satisfied with the results. He was taking this seriously because he knew that it was a totally different matter from having a random face in the UVR. This face would accompany him through his entire journey in the individual games. And the SGA would pay him hefty sums of SC in each game based on his reputation and popularity within the audience. Thus, he must choose an image that would bring him the highest amount of revenue while still not releasing any private information about him. Upstata T from N0/V/LB/co/M. He wasn't planning on going a full-fledged idol like the majority of the SG idol type players. However, he would be a fool to miss such free money coming his way. He knew that in his bloodline path, every coin mattered. Felix stopped bothering with random creations and decided to search in the VR network engine for a face to replicate slightly. Who is handsome to the point it's deadly and addictive? He imputed this question in the search bar and immediately got millions of results. He studied the faces of those handsome men and kept clicking his tongue in wonder at how many potions and treasures they had to eat to appear like this. But still, he didn't find that X factor that would set him apart from the other players. A factor that only a few people had, such as Asna. Abruptly, his eyes shone with delight after imagining Asna's face and comparing it with those men. He found out that their beauty, which they spent billions of coins on, looked dogshit compared to Asna's natural face. Without further ado, he asked out loud in his mind. Asna, mind letting me use your face as a mold for my disguise? Yet, he received no response. He expected as much from her. If you don't replay back in 3 seconds, I will take it as your approval. 3, 2, 2.5, 1, 1.5, 1.25, almost 1. With a serious voice, he kept counting backward slowly until he reached 0, yet Asna still didn't reply. Felix began to feel a little bit spooked about her silence. He felt that based on her character she would definitely use this chance to counterattack his previous claim of saying that he saw a better beauty than her. After all, why bother asking for her face if there were better-looking people than her, right? But she didn't, which was uncanny to Felix. He checked the time on his AP bracelet and saw that there was still 1 hour before he gets teleported to the game hall. So, he decided to re-enter his consciousness and check on her situation. Inside the consciousness lake, in the mist-made mansion. Speechless and bewildered, Felix stared at Asna, who returned to her flame spirit form and was hovering above the bed slightly. He knew that she was going to throw a tantrum, but he never realized it would be this bad. Felix realized that he struck a nerve by his heavy attacks after seeing Asna behave like this. After all, how could a shameless woman like her who ate insults for breakfast get affected by his remarks? Asna, what's up with you? Felix asked a bit worried while approaching her slowly. Asna didn't respond to his question, she merely kept flicking above her bed in utter silence. Felix sat next to her and sighed after seeing that she was thoroughly ignoring his existence. Asna, I don't know if my insults are the reason for you behaving like this or something else. However, I am sorry if said something I shouldn't. Felix apologized while bowing his head slightly without fanfare. He might be an asshole to her most of the time since that's how their relationship was, bickering and throwing insults at each other casually. But if he really affected her somehow or someway, he was not ashamed to apologize to her. Ultimately, she deserved this much as his partner and tenant. All right, I leave you alone for now. I got a game to win." After noticing that nothing much changed even with his apology, he stood up and walked away. "But after the game, I will return to check on you," he added one last time before his form dissolved into mist and returned back in the lake. In front of the mirror, Felix stopped changing his disguise and began browsing for masks in the VR shop. He wanted to use Asna's face as his mold since he was positive that his popularity would exceed everyone else just by his appearance. But he couldn't use it unless he got Asna's permission. So he could only use a mask for the first game temporarily until he fixed his relationship with her. After a while, he chose a black hoodie that covered half his face, showing darkness in the upper half and leaving the lower half exposed. Mainly, just his mouth and chin. If the hoodie didn't have a yellow smirky emoji sticker on its chest, he would have appeared a bit badass. But honestly, who are we kidding? Felix was literally planning to join the game wearing sweatpants, white sneakers, and above all that hoodie. He appeared more like he was heading to the grocery store to buy cigarettes and not join deadly games that he might lose his life in. This will do for now. Felix clicked purchase and closed the shop. Then, he sat in utter silence, trying to calm his mind before he gets teleported inside the game hall. "Good evening, contenders." A thin man with one mouth on each side of his cheeks greeted warmly the 50 unique players that were standing under him in a massive well-lighted hall. The hall somewhat resembled the ancient ballrooms, as it had a humongous gorgeous chandelier right in the middle, plenty of paintings hanging on the walls, and most importantly a stage with a podium on it. Felix lifted his head slightly and gazed at this game's MC, who was standing behind the podium with a hint of surprise. "Never thought the four-lipped Marlion would commentate for us. This game is getting interesting each time. As usual, I will explain the details of this game, as well as provide answers to any questions you have after my explanation." Marlion did not waste any time as he straightway began his explanation of the rules of the game that were not listed in full detail, or were listed but need quite a hefty effort to just find them. Let's start with the streaming revenue. Currently, there are 50 participants in this death race. Based on the SGA rules, the revenue will be split 80% for the Alliance and 20% for you. Irked, Marlion paused his explanation after seeing some newbies make disgruntled noises on this arrangement. T/his chapter is up.d by nvel bin.co/m. On what basis does the Alliance takes 80% all at once and leave us to fight over their crumbles? That's right. We are the ones risking our lives here. At least give us 1% each as basic courtesy. Tisk, if I knew the Alliance was this greedy, I would not have bothered taking part. Felix observed indifferently those newbies making a scene due to their laziness to read the entire SG contract. After all, everything about the SG was within the contract. As long as one took his time to read it carefully, he would avoid those kinds of embarrassing situations. Exactly like this case, as every veteran or smart newbie either laughed mockingly while pointing their fingers or gave a piteous look at those buffoons, who stood dumbstruck after seeing the situation unfold beyond their script. They believed that the revenue arrangement was truly unfair to the players. Hence, they expected some form of agreement from their peers or at least act indifferently like Felix. Too bad, they had to learn the hard way to respect each contract they sign. Pop. 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 A single finger snap from Marlion exploded their brains to oblivion, killing them both here and in real life. Not a single player got their clothes dirtied by the brain's matter and juices that sprayed everywhere. They knew what was about to happen beforehand, thus the moment those morons opened up their mouths, they put a quite substantial distance between them. Everything was within the contract. One just needs to read it. Now that we dealt with the normal pests, let's carry on our explanation. Marlion casually spoke after killing 4 players with cold blood. Yet, no one bothered to call him out on his actions. They simply listened with concentration to him, continuing his explanation from where he left. And this time, no one interrupted him. The 20% will be split based on 3 bases: popularity, victory, and eliminations. Marlion extended 3 fingers and followed. First, the popularity. The more fans you have within the viewers, whether live or on stream, the more percentages you will earn. He closed 1 finger. Second, the victory. This one is no-brainer. If you won the game, you will get straight away 3% all at once, without counting your popularity increase, of course. He then left only 1 finger and continued a bit enlivened than before. Lastly, eliminations. The more you kill, the more you excite the game for the audience. And anyone who does so will be rewarded with more revenue. So you better fight as brutal as possible, otherwise even if you won the game, your revenue won't be that high. Marlion said while smiling creepily with only his left cheek mouth. Some newbies got extra motivated from his claim, but still, the majority merely rubbed their ears in boredom over this weak attempt to force them to focus on fighting and not emerging as the champion. They were not stupid to give up on victory for mere some revenue, while they could obtain a wish after being crowned as the champion. Honestly, Marlion didn't even target those veterans who were well aware of his plan. But the unranked newbies, v.i.g.i.ns, who were playing for the very first time. He wanted them to seek fights instead of hiding cowardly like the majority of new players do after entering the game. Now, let's move on to what you should expect in the game. Marlion did not dilly-dally anymore on the revenue explanation and moved on to the nitty-gritty details that Felix and those veterans wanted to hear. As only in this hall, where could they see the game map, the hidden additions, and ask about the things they didn't understand from the listed rules. This was the purpose of the game hall. Marlion pressed on a button in his podium and a large screen descended slowly from behind him. Thud-ung. Immediately after stopping, Marlion turned it on and displayed a humongous red planet. This is Solaria Planet, where your race will be held. He introduced composedly. Now let's take a look at your racetrack. The vision rapidly zoomed inside the red planet until it stopped above an empty crimson desert that didn't have a single living being above it, or probably even underneath it. This is where you will start the race, and also finish. He pointed a finger at the long line made of black and white squares in the desert. Multiple sighs of relief resounded in the hall after seeing the desert. This only meant that most of them included it in their practice, just like Felix. Unfortunately, their relieved expression did not last for long after Marlion introduced the second area of the race. After exiting the desert, you will enter this canyon. The players' expressions instantly turned unsightly after seeing the narrow paths of the canyon that only allowed a maximum number of 3 cars hovering beside each other. They knew that a massacre would begin before they reached the canyon. Since, if they entered it all at once, those at the front would always be free targets to those behind them. Simply because there was no space to maneuver. Marlion ignored their noises and moved on to the third area of the race. 7 sit envelb/n, C/M for L testvels. The end of the canyon is connected to tunnels leading to the underground. He gave his trademark creepy smile and joked, "Don't worry about visibility. The river of lava underneath will take care of it." No one laughed at his tasteless joke after seeing the river spewing bursts of lava upward, reaching at least 200 meters in height. Their F*King hover cars were only able to reach 100 meters in height. How are we supposed to fly through that? They thought to themselves. This race is getting harder and harder. I doubt many will walk out of it alive, especially the newbies. Felix paid his condolence to the poor newbies who lucked out in this tragic game. Yet, things only kept getting worse and worse as Marlion continued to show the following areas. Starting off by leaving the underground from the mouths of inactive volcanoes. The messed up part was that the majority of them were freaking active. So the players had to find an exit from their first shot. Otherwise, they would get delayed significantly. However, even if they managed to leave the underground smoothly, the only thing that would greet them was a sea of lava they had to pass through successfully to reach the red desert and then the starting/finish line. After so a lap would be marked as complete. That's the racetrack, and to win the game you simply have to course 3 laps in it. The MC casually belittled the track hellish areas. Make 3 laps in it? They doubted they would survive the first one. Felix was not despairing as the majority of those players after seeing the track. After all, he had seen much worse before. He was only slightly surprised that the Alliance actually used one of those maps for a bronze game, where newbies' numbers were at best. Moving on to Hidden Edition. Without further ado, Marlion pressed a button and suddenly the empty track had aqua bluish boxes with question marks on them hovering randomly in every track area. Felix looked at those boxes speechlessly. Why do they resemble a famous game on my planet? His speculations soon turned to be slightly off the mark by Marlion detailed clarification. Those boxes contain 3 types of results. 1. Abilities that can be used on you or against others. 2. Items from the prize pool. You can even obtain Purity Fountain drop inside one. Yet before he continued to the last result, the players went completely bonkers after hearing about the second result. What the hell? Doesn't this mean we can just farm items inside the race without bothering about first place? This is exactly what I am going to do. I already know that my driving skills are trash, so it's better to just earn free items. True, I might do the same. IQ. Silence. Not a single peep was heard anymore after Marlion's shout. They knew that he could pop their brains easily like the 4 dead bodies near them. He just needed to wait until they broke a rule and take care of them. That's why MCs in the SG should always be shown respect in the game they commentate on, as they were also a judge in it. If you let me finish my clarification, you wouldn't be hopping around now like idiots. He eyed them disrespectfully and continued from where he left. The third result is traps. Some of those boxes have within them either negative effects to your vehicle or yourself, as well as bombs that can straightaway explode your car to oblivion. So if you want to farm those boxes and give up on the race, do so at your own risk. The MC concluded his explanation with a warning. I am not touching those for sure. Felix firmly made his decision. In his eyes, solutions that rely on luck never had good endings. So, it's better to race properly while ignoring those boxes that might lead to his death from a single mistake. Felix was not the only one who decided to ignore the existence of the boxes, as the majority of the players' delighted eyes were turned off by the third result. They would rather eliminate their peers and obtain game points to buy items than rely on a mystery box. The only ones who were still slightly excited about them were the losers who never had a chance to win in the first place by depending on their driving skills or bloodline abilities. In a sense, this hidden edition was to give those losers a chance to make things difficult for the veterans when they get hunted for game points later on. But that's only if they didn't die straight away from the first box they pick up. Oh. I get it now. Felix chuckled after realizing why the Purity Fountain drop, a gold rank reward, was in this game. It turned out, it was compensation for the veterans, who now had their game difficulty increased even further. Ultimately, the newbies weren't supposed to pose a threat to their game, however, by adding such a deadly external help, things wouldn't be the same anymore. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Marlion looked at his bracelet and said, You have 15 minutes of Q&A, begin. Immediately after, the majority of players lifted their hands in the air like students in a classroom asking for permission to head to the bathroom. Marlion pointed at a woman with short caramel hair, who had a name tag above her head. Miss Fairy, ask away please, he requested. Miss Fairy coughed to clear her dry throat and asked, I wonder if the active and inactive volcanoes will remain the same in every lap or will mix randomly. Of course they will mix in each lap. Otherwise, it will be a meaningless obstacle after everyone memories the real exit. Marlion answered calmly. Thank you, that's all I want to know. Miss Fairy nodded her head and retreated to the back of the pack. Next, you Mr. Absolute Vision, go ahead please. He pointed at a good-looking man with a white bandage, sealing his eyes tightly. One could only wonder why he chose that name while looking like that. Sir Marlion, I have only a small inquiry, he smiled gently and asked. I wonder what we need to do to obtain the game unique title or the MVP title. Immediately after asking, everyone's ears perked up a bit in interest for the upcoming response. Nothing much. To obtain the unique title, you just need to emerge as the champion. He gave a harmless smile and said, without a single player reaching the finish line after you. Startled, the players gasped at the vicious requirement to obtain the game's unique title. It was already a difficult task to finish the race without dying. Don't even mention emerging as the champion and also block others. After all, who had the time to make sure that everyone was eliminated before finishing the race? Were they supposed to wait at the finish line and block anyone from entering? No one was retarded enough to risk losing a sure victory for a title. Especially when the title was only a unique title and not the MVP title. In their eyes, that's only a bonus. Their true goal should always be to win and only win. Oh. That got you chickened out already? Marlion sneered, if you can't even handle the requirement for obtaining the unique title, there is no need for you to know about the details of the MVP title then. The players felt a bit triggered by his belittling, but they couldn't say much to refute him. He was absolutely right. The thought of aiming for the unique title was dashed from their minds the moment they heard its extreme requirement. Yet, that title was supposed to be the easiest of the two. While the unique title only allowed the players to have a wearable tag above their heads, allowing them to brag and get some reputation within the UVR. The MVP title was a different story entirely. An MC could only give away one MVP title throughout his entire life. Why? Because it was associated with the SG Hall of Fame that allowed only the best of the best to have their names on it. For any player who received an MVP title by an MC, there was almost a certain chance that he would be recommended to have his name part of that magnificent list. Thus, the conditions to receive that title from the MC were on the border of impossibility. The MCS had to make sure that their lifelong title bestowing goes to the best player they saw. Otherwise, their recommendation letter would be rejected. Meaning, neither the player name nor their names would ever land on the Hall of Fame. After receiving his answer, Mr. Absolute Vision bowed his head slightly and backed away. Soon, another participant asked after getting permission. Sir, can you tell us what should we expect from the boxes in detail? Such as the abilities we can obtain or the negative effects. If you want to find out, just pick them up later in the race. Don't waste my time here. Marlion shrugged his question off, causing the player to mumble some curses. But one mean look from Marlion instantly quietened him down obediently. All right, the time is up. You can have 1 hour to speak to each other and team up if you want. I don't care. But after 1 hour you will be teleported inside the track. He gave them a cold glare and warned, you better respond properly to my questions when I interview you later. Or else, you will be blacklisted from any future interviews. That's it for now. Good luck and don't create trouble in the hall. Marlion left as sudden as he arrived. The players kept sharing eye contact with each other in total awkward silence. Then, without warning, every unranked newbie got surrendered by the veterans. Felix as well got encircled by 4 players, looking at him like a piece of cheap flesh. "Mr. Landlord, how about a partnership between me and you? I promise that our alliance will take us to the finish line." A man with spider tattoos and piercings all of his face gave Felix a good-natured smile as he promised him. Yet, his smile only made Felix curl his lips in disgust after seeing that his teeth were black and pierced as well. EAD new chapters on no/v/e/ln.com. Before Felix could shoo him away from his sight and disgusting him any further, a tiger-clawed man did it for him by asking in ridicule, "Heh, then what? Are you going to eliminate him?" He eyed Felix with a polite smile on his face. "I swear on my mother that if we reached the finish line together, we will compete with a final sprint to decide the champion." He asked with a sincere look, "Doesn't that sound much better? Scram to the side, compete fairly? Do you think Mr. Landlord has shit for a brain to believe in your lies?" A merciless scold came out of a gorgeous busta lady, who suddenly appeared from behind Felix. Felix turned his head and saw her smiling alluringly while hugging his forearm with one hand, pressuring it against her busted chest. She blinked her eyes seductively towards Felix's face, which had a slight grin on it. "Handsome, how about you pick me?" she asked. "I won't bullshit you that I will allow you to win, but I can promise you an unforgettable night, whether I won or not." She whispered the last part in his ears. However, Felix only stared speechlessly at this woman, who said she wouldn't bullshit him but still called him handsome without even seeing his face. Wasn't that peak bullshit? Felix did not wait until they start arguing about him. He already let this farce play long enough, and it was time to send those exploiters' vultures away. "Anyone who goes up the podium and flashes his genitals to everyone will get my partnership." He showed them a playful smile and said, "That's my only condition." "Are you king with us?" the tiger-clawed man asked with narrowed eyes. After realizing that he was not gullible to join them, the gorgeous lady furiously removed Felix's hand, which was taking advantage of her chest by groping it silently. He wouldn't be Felix if he didn't take advantage of such a freebie. "Indeed, I am messing with you. Now if you don't scram from my sight at this instant, I will f.u.c.k with you for real during the game." Felix's playful smile instantly changed to a cold one as he threatened them frigidly. "Hee, I hope they put me next to you during the race, so we can continue our conversation." The tiger-clawed man gave Felix an unfriendly glare while walking away. "See you in the race as well, handsome." He was followed by the busta lady after blowing a kiss at Felix with a vicious glint in her eyes. The others left their own remarks and threats and went hunting for other prey to take advantage of. No one wanted a real alliance or partnership, as everyone was betrayed at some point by his partner, Felix included. This was called individual games for a reason. After all, no matter how many alliance or partnership a player makes, in the end, only one champion was allowed in each game. Tiger Claw, Mystifying Beauty, Wobbly Web, and Guard of Logic. Targets have been chosen. Felix read their tagged names while grinning deviously. While others target gullible newbies to take advantage of, Felix on the other hand target the ones he was about to eliminate. Wasn't better to focus on racing while the prey delivers themselves to him without effort? He just needed to insult them a little and their inflated ego would deal with the rest. He knew that veterans always had that look of pride and superiority when dealing with newbies. Thus, they wouldn't handle being insulted by Felix, who never played a single game in his life. Too bad for them, Felix played games more they could even imagine. Felix scanned everyone's name tags and soon found the player he scouted 4 days before, easy_wind. It seems that he is planning to ride solo as well. He eyed a man wearing a white leather jacket with dark sunglasses on, sitting in the hall corner all by himself. Felix rubbed his chin lightly while pondering about an important detail he missed. I should probably buy sunglasses as well. Immediately after, he opened the VR shop under everyone's eyes and bought brown sunglasses. Then, he wore them under his hoodie. Sadly, the darkness was also hiding them. A moment later, the entire hall was filled with VR shops and players buying ones as well. Somehow, everyone forgot that they would be racing under 3 suns. Ladies and gentlemen, how are you coping up with this heat? Marlion asked through his microphone. He was sitting at a commentary table midair above millions of spectators, who were seated with shallow or no clothes at all under the shade of a humongous umbrella. The umbrella was blocking the scorching sunlight from reaching them, as well as lowering the heat to the bare minimum. Unfortunately, Felix and the players, who were each standing near their hover cars, did not enjoy the same treatment. As the only protection they had were the sunglasses they bought earlier. Thank God for that. I ain't even feeling it. On my planet, this heat was called absolute zero. All west ch.rs on n.o/vli/n/.cm. When you are going to brag, at least make some sense, UF** king retard. The spectators yelled their responses with red faces and sweaty foreheads, creating a symphony of unrecognizable noises. This was Marlion's true aim, to hear as much noise as possible. It didn't matter what they say, as long as the atmosphere was hyped, it meant he was doing his job well. Now let's begin interviewing our dear players. It seems like some of them are not handling the heat well. He laughed in a mocking manner while pointing his microphone at some players, who were crouching next to their cars, trying to take cover from the suns. Ha 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 ha. What p** size? Can't even handle such a breeze. The crowd laughed out loud with him after seeing this sight. But the players did not feel ashamed at all, as they remained in the same position. King bastards laughing because they are hiding under an umbrella. I dare them to stay 5 seconds in this weather. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience. Please click #47498409573148821 for visiting. *CK. I feel my skin is melting. Is it too late to give up racing? Those players either did not practice like Felix in the training center or did not manage to secure a room for themselves, thus having to deal with this 59 degrees Celsius weather for the first time. Felix was also not doing well under the heat since his outfit was truly messing him up badly. But he could only endure it until the 30 minutes of interviews end, so he could enjoy the coolness of his car. Whoosh! Marlion didn't dilly-dally anymore and nosedived speedily until he smashed into the ground. He then began the interview segment with the prettiest girl in the players. He pointed his microphone near her face and asked her with his left side mouth smiling, "Madam Pluto, can you share with us your reason for participation?" She did a peace sign to the streaming camera at her right and said cutely, "It's of course because of the loyal fans that supported me in every game, whether I won or lost." She then blew a kiss to the camera and drew a heart in the air. Give me a *king break already. We are dying from the heat here and you are making it even worse by your cringy idol performance. Irritated, Felix banged his head with the car roof as he murmured, "We love you, Pluto. Smile at me, Pluto. Have my babies, Pluto, ouch. Who the hell slapped my neck?" However, only Felix and other players thought so. As for the male audience, they all went into a frenzy, removing their shirts and spinning them above their heads. That's an honorable reason, Madam Pluto. I admire you for it. Marlion's strict and vicious persona from the game hall was no more, as he said with a moved expression. Tell us, what do you wish for when you win? I wish for my fans to live forever to accompany me. Madam Pluto pouted, but I know that's too much to ask. So I only want beautifying flower to appear more breathtaking. I am only doing this for my fans. She added the last part while pointing her finger at the camera in a cute manner. Felix almost vomited on the hood of his car after hearing her twist the wish to make it seem like she was doing it for her fans. Should I eliminate her first for ruining my mood? Felix pondered seriously while looking at the short curly-haired girl that appeared just like a doll. Never mind, others will take care of her. He switched to other players and saw that the majority were already about to lose their shit under this heat plus this constant torture by Pluto. Marlion did not linger anymore next to her after hearing a positive response from the audience. He walked between the different shapes of cars and types to search for a unique player that would hype the game even more. Soon, he saw Felix with his hoodie on, banging his head lightly on the car's roof like a retard. It seemed like his heavy outfit under this heat started to affect his mentality. Marlion's eyes brightened a bit and rushed towards Felix, but suddenly, he stopped after seeing a tag above Felix's head that says "No interviews." TSK, thinking yourself as a hotshot? Moron, later you will beg to be interviewed by us. Marlion didn't bother with Felix anymore after seeing that tag. He merely scoffed and left to interview other players. Before long, the interview segment finished and the players were requested to enter their cars in order to prepare for the start. Yet, before they turned their engines on, some cars got their heavy modifications instantly removed, turning a giant beast into a.k.d rat. Felix snickered at those morons, who already lost the race before it even began. How were they going to race, when their defensive and offensive parts were removed randomly? Some cars even had their entire launchers removed, leaving the owners no tears to shed. Still, they turned on their engines with watery eyes and prayed to survive the game with their lackle.u.s.ter modification. The audience cheered passionately after seeing the 46 cars lift up slowly until they reached 70 meters in height. Then, hovered in their places without moving an inch. Felix's luck was quite bad as he got placed right in the middle of the pack. This would hinder him greatly when he tries to break off and fly solo. Not to mention, 2 of his targets were placed quite near him. This would make it even worse after they focus their attacks on him during the upcoming chaos. Let's see if you are going to keep your C.O.C.KY attitude after I destroy you. Tiger Claw licked his lips as he gazed at Felix's vehicle that was in front of him. Marlion, after seeing that everyone was in their position, began the countdown while asking the audience to count with him. 10, 9, 8, 3, 2, 1. G-O-O-O! The spectators threw their fists in the air while cheering thunderously for the players, who bolted as fast as possible above the red desert. Boom! Yet, before they even reached 500 meters, an adorable pink car with bunny ears got instantly devoured by multiple bloodline abilities, turning it into metal junk mixed with some blood and flesh raining from above. Sadly, Madame Pluto got eliminated first. Rest in peace. Saddened, Marlion sighed as he informed the dumbstruck male audience. No! Not my girl. How could she die? We didn't even make babies yet. Ouch! Who the F***CK keeps slapping my neck? I will butcher you. It was about time to change my idol anyway. Madame Pluto's fans, some did not receive the news well, while the majority switched to another beautiful female in the players and began cheering for her like nothing ever happened. Loyal fans? That was merely wishful thinking in the Supremacy games. That's what you get when you do your act at the wrong time and wrong place. Felix snickered, glancing at the destroyed car of Pluto from his back mirror. After all, if it was in different weather or another game, no one would have bothered with her. But to actually keep annoying them even when they were being fried alive under the scorching suns. She truly was asking for it. She should have acted modestly like other idols in the game with them and no one would have dealt with her that heavily. Bomb! Felix's car shook slightly after a bolt of lightning smashed its roof from above. It's time to focus on my condition and stop bothering with dead people. Felix immediately focused on maneuvering sideways the following lightning bolts that kept showering everyone in 10 meters radius. Haha, eat my bolts, you C.O.C.KY bastard. Tiger Claw shouted, grinning. He had his upper body outside the driver window with his hands raised high above, calling for lightning bolts to strike down on Felix's vehicle. Felix glanced at his pursuer with a mocking smile. He snapped his finger and a white mist covered his entire car, making it resemble a speeding cloud that kept leaving a long trail of poison smoke behind it. What the hell is thy? Before Tiger Claw could even figure out what he was hit with, his eyelids dropped slowly until they were closed for good. Then, he lost his balance and fell from his vehicle into the crimson desert. Thud. If his entire upper body was not outside the car, he would have only slept for 5 seconds then wake up. But sadly, he wanted to act dashing and summon the lightning bolts with animation, where he could have done it with a finger snap or just a thought. The other players immediately dodged Felix's long white mist after seeing the fate of Tiger Claw. They did not dare remain behind him anymore. Was that poison? If I recalled properly, only sleepiness aura has such an effect. Guard of Logic, who was on the right side of Felix during the start of the race, wondered out loud. Soon, he turned his wheel left, trying to put some distance from Felix. He lost his motivation to attack anymore. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience. Please click #475014120237199909 for visiting. If Tiger Claw didn't get eliminated so fast, they would have allied together to target Felix. Yet, the F***er lost before he even dealt any damage to Felix's car. Could one get any more unreliable? Trying to retreat after provoking me? Felix said with a smirk while rolling down his left window. Then, he created one light yellow bomb and held it in his hand. If Guard of Logic saw what Felix was doing, he would have raised his window to shield himself. Too bad, the white mist was blocking everyone's vision, including his. Poof! And so, he was smacked in the face unexpectedly with one yellowish bomb that was thrown by Felix using his super strength passive. It was so fast, Guard of Logic didn't even know what he was hit with before absorbing the paralyze inducement through his nose. Scared out of his wits by the sudden assault, he wanted to press the acceleration button on his dashboard to speed away from Felix. Yet, his hand was frozen on the wheel, unresponsive to his wishes and orders. It was clutching the wheel so tightly, green veins were protruding from it. What's happening to me? Why can't I move my body? He screamed in his mind, utterly frightened. The poor thing couldn't even express himself out loud, as the paralyze inducement affected everything. Even his mouth. The only thing that was unaffected was his mentality and thought process. He soon realized that there was nothing to afraid of, as he could still activate his abilities. After all, they only needed a thought. Nothing more, nothing less. Unfortunately, his realization was quite late by a second. Bye-bye. Felix didn't waste his inducement duration as he threw 2 more acid green bombs at Guard of Logic's open window. Poof! Poof! Wide-eyed, not able to even close them off, Guard of Logic face was smacked by one bomb while the other hit his car's dashboard. Arua! Immediately after the mist made contact with his skin, it started to corrode rapidly like he was thrown into a pool filled with acid. Sadly, he could only wince in pain without the right to even scream his anguish away. His face, skin, clothes that he wore, and even the car interior, were being melted. TSH. TSK. Electric sparks started to break here and there inside the car. After its dashboard, the main controlling unit was fried by the acidic mist. All of this happened in the span of 2 seconds while he was still paralyzed. However, the 5 seconds duration of the inducement finally ended. freeing his body from its effects. F***ck Yogu Landsrolled. The first thing that came out of his lips was an unrecognizable curse. It turned out that the acid reached even his vocal cords and ruined them as well. Whoosh! As expected, his car nosedived into the desert after having its controls completely frayed. Yet, Guard of Logic wasn't even paying attention to so. His bloodshed-ruined eyes were focused only on one target. That was Felix's car as it sped away, chasing after the rest of the pack. Boom! A huge orange mushroom cloud rose behind Felix's car. Get the L-test VLS at .o/v/e/l/by.co. Till his death, Guard of Logic didn't manage to activate a single ability. What a beautiful play by Mr. Landlord, managing to eliminate 2 players at once. Thrilled, Marlion praised Felix with his right cheek mouth. It seemed like the left cheek mouth was for conversations while the right one was for commentary. Without getting asked to do his job, he immediately showcased the highlight of Felix's outplay on the large screen to those who were paying attention to other players. So clean! He wasn't even pressured by them. Holy shit, how can he use 2 different types of poison in one ability? I believe that's the doing of legendary bloodline. After all, there is a wide chasm between epic rank beasts and legendary ones. True, that could only be it. He must either have a huge background or lucky as hell to win it in the lottery. PFFFFFF. Lottery. I can't believe people still actually trust in those scammers. Why are you laughing, moron? Since he is hiding his identity while having a legendary bloodline, it only means he chanced upon it. I second that. What a lucky bastard. Every part of the stadium had different conversations by the audience after seeing that magnificent display of merely 2 abilities combined to easily get rid of 2 players. After the play finished rolling, Marlion replaced it with another one. This one was displaying 3 players getting instantly eliminated by Mr. Absolute Vision. Astonished, the spectators watched 3 players' cars crash into each other due to losing their eyesight for more than 30 seconds. If they weren't grouped inside a huge pack, getting blinded or not, it wouldn't matter much, since the car was stable enough to fly in a straight line. Too bad, Mr. Absolute Vision took advantage of the chaos that was happening currently to easily egg himself some free game points. No wonder he chose that name. Who would dare see in his presence? Only his vision is absolute. Marlion commentated passionately on the highlight. Meanwhile, Felix kept accelerating through the pack, dodging abilities and counterattacking whenever an opportunity presented itself. But the majority of his attacks did not end well, since he already turned off the aura that was concealing him. It was consuming his energy each second. He would be a fool to keep it active for that long. This led to his bombs getting spotted beforehand and dodged successfully. Hell, can't you leave me alone and focus on another one? Felix was quite vexed by their multiple attempts to break him down each time he passed someone. Well, he only had himself to blame since the majority of the players were driving in 2s or 3s, protecting each other and attacking anyone who surpassed them. Felix, who kept accelerating passing one by one solo, was provoking them continuously. Thus, it was only a natural outcome that he gets focused on by the majority of the alliances. Anyone who wanted to leave the pack unscratched must survive their salvo first. Let's see how my new unlocked ability fares against the slippery worm. Wobbly Web, the man with spider tattoos on his face from before, kept smiling like a devil with his blacked teeth. His devilish smile was understandable, as his eyes were currently on Felix's car that was ahead of him, maneuvering up and down the rain of abilities thrown at it. Shortly after, 2 thin tubes came out from his car headlamp positions. One at the right, the other at the left. Phew, phew. 2 long silky strings were launched from them, targeting Felix's car. Even though it was constantly on the move, it still got latched by those webs from behind. Hee hee, my webs can be controlled remotely by my mind, how can I miss you? Wobbly Web smirked and activated his newly obtained ability. Spiderling's army, go show him what true poison is. He ordered a bunch of small red spiders that were being constantly created from his hand, then dropped on the silky web. After latching on it, they started to crawl rapidly towards the end of the string that was connected to the back window of Felix's car. Hee hee, you should have accepted my partnership willingly without insulting me. Eager and somewhat crazed, Wobbly Web said while running his tongue on his pierced teeth. He probably thought that he looked dashing while doing so. But honestly, if the camera was on him now, the majority of the spectators would have vomited in disgust. After a couple of seconds, all of those red spiderlings made it safely to the other side. They had the size of a toe, thus it wasn't really hard for them to get access to the interior of Felix's car. Just his open windows were more than enough. Wobbly Web waited until all of them got into their position before ordering out loud, "My babies. Poison him to death." Oh, what do we have here? It seems like Landlord is in a pinch. Marlion instantly noticed Wobbly Web's ambush and switched the camera focus from those at the lead to them. Creeped out, the crowd drew a deep breath at the sight of thousands of small red spiderlings crawling all over Felix's car and entering inside from every hole and opening they found. He is doomed. What kind of F***cat-up ability is that? Who can defend against such an army while driving? Sigh, that legendary bloodline is truly wasted on him. That's the peak ability of Queen Harvest Spider. That's an epic rank tier 1 bloodline. Hee hee, I guess his luck has been totally consumed when he won that bloodline. Suddenly, their chatter quietened down a bit as they watched Mouth Agape, the spiderlings they were just glorifying gets engulfed in an acid green mist. Then, magically disappear after the mist was removed. Felix's car kept accelerating forward as nothing happened. Marlion, the spectators, and more so Wobbly Web stared at Felix's sparkling clean car with a dumbfounded expressions. Are my eyes playing a trick on me? Or did I just watch an epic rank peak ability get dealt with the same way as spraying gas at flies? Brother, you are missing the point here. His aura switched to another poison like his bombs. Can he do that with all of his abilities? The spectator then added with a slight tremble on his voice, and how many poisons can he switch to? Everyone near the man felt a shiver in their skin as they imagined the immense possibilities of this overpowered bloodline. That's it, I am focusing only on Landlord from now on. Let's see how many poison inducements he can use. I am with you. Count me as well. TSK, I bet he would use at max 5 inducement like the known legendary bloodlines. Just like a domino effect, the crowd bit by bit began switching their vision from known veterans to Felix after realizing how unique his bloodline was. Some spectators knew of such an ability to switch inducements since a few legendary poison bloodlines had it as well. However, the maximum number of inducements they could use never went beyond 5. They knew that Felix's bloodline would be just the same as them, nothing to boast about. Yet, they still switched their focus from the lead to him. They were somewhat curious about what 5 inducements he unlocked. Ha 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 ha. Meanwhile, Felix was laughing his ass out inside the car while watching a small cute spider on top of his hand. It was biting him viciously, trying to penetrate his skin and spew poison inside. Yet, Felix's defenses were too strong for its little fangs. Trying to poison this daddy? Aren't you simply asked to be slapped in the face? Felix chuckled one last time and smacked the spider away like a fly. He glanced at Wobbly's car that was speeding away from him in retreat and sneered, "You lucky this was a race format." Felix ignored him and continued his acceleration to catch up. If this was a different game mode, Felix wouldn't hesitate for even a second before hunting him down in retaliation. However, this was sadly a race. And in a race, he should only have one thing in mind, and that was to reach the finish line first and foremost. Hence, he couldn't waste any more time dealing with those pests, as his rank was currently 15 from 34 players that were left. A whopping 12 players were eliminated in the very first minutes of the race. This just showed how dangerous it was to remain within the pack. Good thing, the players now somewhat spread out in the wide desert. There wasn't really a track to limit their flying space or such. One could literally go wherever he wanted. However, to reach the second area of the track, then third, and the fourth, one must always fly in a straight line and minimize any type of delay. This meant those players who spread out, going either left or right, chickened out after seeing players get eliminated constantly. Felix and the rest of the players, who kept on flying in a straight line, weren't really complaining about it. Oh, mystery box? After flying for a while solo, Felix's eyes caught the tail of 3 cars ahead of him. They were rushing towards a quite large blue box that had a question mark on it while revolving slowly on itself. They were trying to be the first to obtain it or hinder their competitors from doing so. Just because the veterans decided not to rely on those boxes, it didn't mean they would let those losers get hold of them. After all, who knows if they managed to get an ability that could turn things around? It seems the silver car is going to it. Felix observed from distance and slowed his speed a bit to not catch up to them. 3 players fighting was already a crowd. No need to add himself to the mix. Boom! Scared shitless, Felix instantly closed his eyes and changed his direction reflexively after he saw a massive explosion originating from the blue box. Marlion was definitely not bullshitting us. Felix thought with cold sweat in his back. He didn't think that the bombs inside the boxes were strong enough to destroy everyone in the vicinity. Heck, if he didn't slow down, the force would have definitely cracked his front window. This scene just further reinforced his decision of not touching those mystery boxes. More like mystery scams. He murmured while dodging some alloy scrubs raining from above. The only ones who enjoyed the fireworks were Marlion, who was hyping it even further, and the spectators who paid to see exactly those brutal deaths. After 10 minutes of continuous flying, Felix finally saw the Great Canyon that had thin cracks in it. Those were actually the narrow paths they were supposed to pass through to reach the underground tunnels. Felix pushed the acceleration pedal harder and wheezed towards one of them. Hopefully, this one is in a straight line. He wished quietly while entering the crack. Unfortunately, the path turned into a crooked one with multiple turns and narrow chalks that could be entered only by flying horizontally. The path couldn't get any more messed up. Read latest OVLS at nv/e/l/by.com. F***ck me. Irked and irritated, Felix began slowing down his speed in order to weave his way in those steep turns. Each time he reached one, he would drift through them successfully. Good thing his driving skills were not too shabby, letting him have a smooth journey even inside this crooked path. Phew, phew, phew. Out of nowhere, 3 wind blades approached Felix's car from behind rapidly. Their loud sound was enough to let Felix know that he was being attacked. And, smooth my ass, talk about jinxing it. Just good, more trouble. Without even glancing at the back mirror, Felix moved sideways, managing to dodge only 1 blade. He noticed them quite late to maneuver all of them. Slice, slice. The back of his car got cut up, but only slightly, leaving shallow marks behind. The car's defensive counterparts Felix used could take a beating of this degree. Tisk, no wonder this bastard didn't modify his offense too much. Inside a thin silver car that had blue clouds paintings on it, a pale handsome man with long diamond-like earrings clicked his tongue in criticism. His name tag was Wind Cloud. Whatever, no matter how hard his car defenses are, it won't survive my wind blades forever. He said, grinning. He kept summoning long wind blades from his hand and placing them above a wide curvy platform that was under his seat. That platform was connected to his car's frontal bumper. Honestly, it shouldn't be called as such, since it appeared more like a curvy open mouth. Felix had two medium-sized launchers, while this dude had a launcher stretching from left to right. Each player modified his car to fit their bloodline's abilities perfectly. Immediately after placing 3 blades stacking on each other, he clicked a button and they got projected swiftly from the opening towards Felix's car that was drifting stylishly. However, this time none of them managed to land on Felix's car as it suddenly plunged down rapidly like it was pulled down by gravity. Works every time. Felix chuckled and turned the engine back on after his successful maneuver. What the F***CK? That's illegal! Furious and somewhat shocked, Wind Cloud slapped his car wheel after seeing Felix's unique way of dodging. However, only he thought so. As for the crowd who were focusing their vision on Felix, they cheered and clapped their hands thunderously. They might have only focused on him due to his unique bloodline, but after spectating his driving skills, they were hooked by him. Awed and thrilled, they chanted his name while watching him dodge every wind blade thrown at him by either his drifts or spins. Nothing touched his car after the first blade. Felix kept on driving without making a single counterattack. He saw that the bastard had his car's windows closed, so the poison wouldn't affect him at all. If he wanted to use his sleepiness aura as a blinding technique, it would consume quite a lot of energy. His energy tank only had 70% left after his previous battles. So he needed to minimize his consumption as the race still had 2 more laps. Plus, each hover car had an automatic navigation system. Thus, even if he used his aura and blinded him, he could just activate automatic driving and he wouldn't have anything to worry about. Still, his speed would be reduced drastically. Felix didn't want him to leave his sight after attacking his car to such a degree. He wanted to kill the bastard right now and right here. Shortly after, the path they were driving through became straight and leading downward gradually. Oh, it seems I am about to reach the tunnels. Felix smirked. I might get rid of this pest in there. He accelerated downward at his top speed. The path was straight now. There was no need to worry about steep curves anymore. Soon, he was followed by the sliver car, sticking to him like glue whenever he went. Felix glanced at the back mirror and saw that no more blades were coming at him. Out of gas already? He sneered at this moron who wasted all of his energy for what? A mere 200 game point if he eliminated him? He was obviously either an eager newbie or a trash veteran who still did not understand the concept of pacing his energy based on the game. Felix had 70% left and was still acting stingy with it. Simply because he had no idea what was going to happen in the rest of the race. Instead of using his abilities recklessly, he would rather first use his brain and find the easiest and cheapest way possible to finish a task. Elemental energy in the games was a finite source that couldn't be replanted in the majority of the games. After a while of driving downward in this kind of stalemate, the tunnels leading to the underground appeared in Felix's eyesight. Felix's eyes brightened up immediately after seeing the tunnel's entrance that only allowed one vehicle to pass through with some difficulty. It was more like a choke than an entrance. Time to get rid of him. He grinned while creating 2 white bombs in his hand. Then, he put them each in a tube that was connected to his back row launchers. He left them inside the tubes and pushed the acceleration pedal to the limit, bolting inside the choke first. Wind Cloud, who was planning on slowing down his speed to pass the choke safely, decided to do the exact opposite after seeing Felix's car put a significant distance between them. Better luck in your next life. Felix laughed wickedly and punched the launch button with the side of his fist. Whoosh, poof, poof. The white bombs got launched swiftly towards the choke. One exploded exactly on the choke, while the other exploded 4 meters before it. The spectators stood from their seats in excitement at the choke that was completely blocked of sight by clouds of white mist. Even they couldn't see its exact position, don't even mention Wind Cloud, who was speeding towards it. No! Mortified, Wind Cloud screamed at the top of his lung while pulling the wheel to himself, hoping to slow down his speed for even a bit. Sadly, his car still entered the white cloud, blocking his vision from the choke's exact location. Everyone knew, even himself, that his fate was decided the moment his vision was blocked. Entering the choke while seeing it in plain sight was already a difficult task. Don't even mention doing it completely blind. Boom! The silver car completely missed the choke and collided with the wall to its right. Felix drove forward with a relieved smile after hearing the anticipated sound of the explosion. Another 200 GP was in the bag. That's all for this part, truckers. See you all in the next video.